I'm a single man who lives alone in Denver. My apartment complex is not what you would call a nice building. I'm on a road close to Colfax Avenue, which, if you're familiar with the geography of this area, is not the safest boulevard in town. I'm a few streets away from it, but close enough that I wouldn't consider this an up-and-coming neighborhood. This evening I was watching Netflix on my couch. My two cats were cuddled up against me as I lay under a comforter. The night before I had watched a horror movie that was scary enough to leave me in an unsettled mood, making it harder to sleep. So this night I decided to watch a stand-up special instead. Keep it light so I wouldn't have any trouble getting some shut-eye. I have classes early the next morning, so I was surprised when I made the conscious decision to turn on a second stand-up special and let myself fall asleep on the couch. I was just so comfy where I was laying and didn't want to move, not even to turn off the several lights throughout my apartment. I remember dozing off around 11 o'clock. It was effortless, which meant I was really snug under the covers with my cats, flanking me on either end, creating a tucked-in feeling. I fell into a dream wherein I was on an impromptu date with this guy whom I didn't recognize, at a Blockbuster video store. He bought me blue and yellow underwear, like a Blockbuster would sell in Dreamland, insinuating I would take the hint of his intentions. He was also desperate for a job, so when we got to the counter, he was given an off-the-cuff interview that didn't go well. And all of a sudden, I'm not sleeping anymore. I'm woken up by a knock on my door. Then a man's voice says, "Maintenance." I just sat there, sitting bolt upright, on my couch. I knew something was wrong. I looked at my phone, which was by my left hand, and the time was 2:15 a.m. I didn't move. The floors in my apartment are old wood, and there are many creaky floorboards. I didn't want whoever was knocking to know somebody was at home and awake, let alone alert to his presence. My cats got up and ran over to the door as they normally would, but I stayed still and listened. After a few minutes with no answer, the man walked away from the door and down the hallway to the stairs. A moment after that, I heard the back door to the building swing open and close. I have one window where I have a partial view of that door, so I break my paralysis and race over to it. I saw an old-looking green SUV sitting in the no parking zone just in front of the back door. It must have been running the entire time because I didn't hear it start up, and the brake lights were glowing red. Someone, presumably the maintenance man, got in the car and it drove off. I don't know what his intentions were, but nobody knocks on someone's door at 2:15 a.m., claiming to work with a landlord with good deeds in mind. Had it been a true emergency, wouldn't he have knocked again? Used his service key to get into the unit? What did I just avoid here? I can only assume it was an attempted robbery at best or abduction at worst. When I was watching the SUV drive off, I surveyed the other apartment windows. They were all dark. I can see every unit except the other two corner apartments below me from that vantage point. I think because my apartment sticks out from the building and has so many windows, I was targeted because my lights were visibly on and noticeable from the street. However, I don't know how this individual got into the building in the first place, as you would need a key to do so. I've never been so legitimately afraid as a single person living alone. I'm grateful that I installed the security chain on my door when I moved in, and I'm also glad that even in my disoriented state, I had the presence of mind not to move from the couch or make any noise. As I recount the event, I can't stop my eyes from leaking tears, though I wouldn't call it crying. My nerves are definitely shot. I don't think I'll be going back to Dreamland anytime soon. I've turned off all the lights save for the lamp by my bed. I usually can't sleep with it on, but tonight I don't think I could sleep with it off. Since my last post here was received so well, I thought I might share some other experiences I've had over the years. It is most unfortunate that my life has been full of creeps and weirdos. First, a disclaimer. This post is marked as not safe for work for a reason. It has some language and some events that are a bit, well, let's just to say, this isn't a story I would tell in church. Also, as this post involves hitchhiking, I realize that somebody out there will surely comment, well, hitchhiking is dangerous. Obviously, I am fully aware of this and you will soon find out. So, now that is out of the way, it was around 2004. I decided I'd had enough of the bitter cold Rocky Mountain winters. I'd spent most of my time since I was around 16 listening almost exclusively to Jimmy Buffett music. Except for small breaks to listen to things like Journey's greatest hits, he was pretty much my entire musical life. I would listen to him talk about these far-off places and these great adventures and weird characters that he'd come across. I read his books, which talked about pretty much the same thing. I read interviews where, you guessed it, he talked about pretty much the same thing. So my young 22-year-old brain was filled with these ideas that adventure was out there waiting for me, that all I had to do was go and find it. Why was I rotting away in a frozen hell when there was so much more to see in tropical climates? And it is thinking that led me to pack everything I owned and stick my thumb out on the interstate. I was headed for Mobile, Alabama, which is Jimmy's hometown. Then I was headed for Florida, where most of his songs are based. Then, well, the possibilities seemed endless. Maybe find work on a boat in exchange for passage to some place like Jamaica. You can go ahead and laugh at me. It's been about 17 years, so wisdom and life experience have allowed me to see clearly how stupid I was for all of this. I can take the ribbing. I've been getting grief over it for the better part of 2 decades. More on that later. My journey took me through Texas and Arkansas. There are many funny stories along this journey, like the time I was picked up in the desert by an old guy named Buddy in a hippie van. However, those stories are not the focus here because they aren't very creepy and are not the focus. Along the way, I also passed through Fouke, Arkansas, and learned about the Fouke monster. Fascinating little bit of folklore, actually. There's a fairly detailed Wikipedia article on the subject if you are interested. So anyway, my journey took me down to South Louisiana and Interstate 10. When you head down the section of highway between Lafayette and Baton Rouge, you have to pass over the Atchafalaya Basin, which means crossing over 18 miles of swampland via bridge. According to Wikipedia, this bridge is the 3rd longest in the US, the 2nd longest in the United States interstate system, and the 14th longest in the world. That's a lot of bridge. And the shoulder? Virtually non-existent. From what I have been told, police are quick to nab anyone foolish enough to try crossing this bridge on foot. So I was stuck. For hours. On the Lafayette side of the bridge, attempting to thumb a ride across. Eventually I was successful, and this is where things take an unsettling turn. A white van pulled up. When the door opened, there was nobody in the vehicle but an old man. He looked to be in his late 60s or early 70s. Quite obese and wearing nothing but a pair of shorts. I climbed in and thanked him for stopping. As we took off, When the Sun Goes Down by Kenny Chesney was playing on the radio. Due to the events that followed, I have forever lost any liking I had for the song. We were headed across this massive bridge with nowhere to stop and nowhere for me to go. The man started looking at me like a dog might look at a particularly meaty bone. It was making me uneasy already. "Hey boy," he said in a thick Cajun accent. "Got a big dick?" "Excuse me?" I asked. I looked back at him and then out the window of the moving vehicle. No escape route. "I bet it's pretty big," he said, smiling at me. I really don't want to discuss that," I said. "Nothing but guardrail on the right and swampland below that. Jumping out would be deadly." "I'd sure like to see it," he said. "Well, I don't think so," I replied. What I was thinking, actually, was, you can wish in one hand and crap in the other and see which one fills up the cup first. Undeterred, the man went on. "I'd sure like to take you into the swamp." Aw, man. If I'd once thought, and I can't remember if I actually did, that this situation couldn't get worse, I would have been so incredibly mistaken. "Nah, I don't think so," I repeated. "Ah, come on, boy," he insisted. "It'd only take about 30 minutes. Please understand that I'm making his English clear for those reading, but it was thick and Cajun, as I've said before, so it was more like it only takes about 30 minutes, which made it way creepier. At this point, the man had asked to see my genitals and had expressed his desire to take me into the swamps. I couldn't help but wonder if he was even going to give me a choice or if he was just going to take me there by force. If he did, I would be virtually helpless. I wasn't from here and didn't know the area. I certainly didn't know the layout of the swamps. I would have been at his mercy for him to do with me as he pleased. And whatever it was that he pleased with took a lot of forms in my mind. Would he take me somewhere and assault me and then feed me to the alligators? Would he hold me prisoner and torture me before killing me and feeding me to the alligators? Or would he just kill me immediately and feed me to them? For some reason, every scenario involved alligators. "I don't want to go into the swamp with you." "No," I said, as firmly as my overwhelming fear would allow. As I am here today writing this, it goes without saying that I didn't end up as gator bait. He didn't take me forcefully into the swamps, and he didn't do anything to me physically. Psychologically, however, his terrifying comments were torture as the bridge went on and on and on for what seemed like forever. When we finally reached the other side and he let me out, I thanked him for the ride as politely as I could manage. When he pulled away, I could have fallen down and kissed the ground. I was safe and I was alive, not dead. My journey continued for several days until I ultimately ended up in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. There was another incident before I got there where I was picked up in Walker, Louisiana, by a man who wasn't so much creepy as he was potentially dangerous. By the time I ran into him, I was physically exhausted and dirty and hadn't had decent rest in days. When he and his wife offered to let me stay in their guest room for the night, I was so grateful to not have slept in the woods or in a ditch along the side of the road, or in the back booth of some diner that I took them up on. Desperation and exhaustion will cloud a person's thinking, that's for sure. As we pulled away, he said, in a genuinely friendly tone, that I was welcome at his home and that he wasn't dangerous. I genuinely believed him until he pulled a gun out from between the seats and warned me that I'd better not be dangerous either. Oh boy. Why did I still go with him? Exhaustion and desperation, like I said. So I'm in the guest room of this trailer in a comfortable bed for the first time in, I'm pretty sure, a couple of weeks. I'm relaxing there when his sister comes over. I don't see them being in a bedroom, but I hear them in the living room. She's upset about something, and that's all she keeps talking about. Finally, I hear the man get fed up and snap, screaming at her, and then I hear a gunshot. No way. There are several seconds there where I'm again terrified of what's about to happen to me. This man just shot his sister, and I'm here in the house with him, potential witness. I look up at the window, wondering if I can fit through it and escape. I cannot. Then I hear her speak up. He shot a hole in the ceiling. So apparently he hadn't shot his sister. He was just a trigger-happy lunatic who had shot around into the ceiling to emphasize his frustration. To be fair, they were actually very nice people. After the commotion, I ended up staying overnight anyway. Call me stupid if you like, I was that tired. And his wife took me back to the interstate in the morning. We had a nice conversation along the way. Wouldn't stay there again though, ever. 1-star rating for sure. But my hosts were very polite to me. When I got to Bay St. Louis, I ended up getting picked up by a lady who lived in Mobile, Alabama, who ended up taking me in, and she is my foster mother to this day. I love her to death. This horrific trip ended with me finding a new life and a new family. So there's a silver lining to every dark cloud, I suppose. Her husband, who is my foster father, has never stopped giving me grief about any of this. In almost 20 years, he's never tired of it. He especially liked to rip on Jimmy Buffett, an artist he despises, and he refers to him as Jimmy Buttplug for some reason. Did I learn anything from this? Well, if you're asking if I learned not to hitchhike, no. I went on several more journeys over the years before I finally decided that I'd had enough, adventure. Somebody will surely think I'm stupid for this. Young people do tend to be stupid, so no argument here. If you need any further proof of this, watch MTV's coverage of Spring Break sometime. Watch how dumb some of these young people act as they party on the beach. As a word of advice to those who might be considering hitchhiking, probably just don't. You can meet a lot of interesting people, you can have a lot of positive experiences, but you can also end up getting picked up by a maniac. And you might not be as lucky as I was. I'm a man in my 20s that lives alone on the very top floor of an apartment block. I've had short hair for the last 10 years of my life. The longest hair on my head is maybe an inch long, if that even. However, across my house I keep finding long hairs on the floor, like long brunette hairs, at least 5 or 6 inches, sometimes longer, and they would be everywhere. Bathroom floor, in the shower, in my cupboard, in my kitchen, on old clothes, living room floor and sofas. I've been single since November and clean often enough that I'm certain it's not my ex-girlfriend's hair. Plus, the color doesn't match anyway. She had solid black hair. These are more a light brunette. Plus, finding them in places like the shower. Where is running water hitting all the sides 5+ times a week? Anyways, I waved it off as well. I work with a lot of people and use the gym and bus sometimes, so naturally hairs are going to stick to my clothes. Well, one day this past April, I finished my early AM gym session and got the call that I didn't have to go to work that day. So naturally, I started to walk home all happy that I had the day to myself. I'm on the 5th floor, the uppermost floor of the building, and the apartment is in such a way that there is only one apartment per floor. I start to hustle up the stairs and don't use the elevator since I'm sweaty from the gym already. Just as I whip a right to go up the last set of stairs from the 4th floor to the 5th, I see my neighbors, on the 3rd floor, daughter coming down the stairs. We lock eyes. We have never spoken before, mostly because we've never had a reason to, but also because out of respect, I didn't want to make her uncomfortable since she's like 19 to 21-ish, and I'm slightly older. The most interaction we've had is that I've spoken to her mother and father before when bumping into each other on the stairs, but not to her. I gave a confused hello. At this point I'm thinking that maybe she went to knock on my door to ask for something. Cup of sugar, maybe? I don't know. I was expecting her to reply with something like, "Oh, hi. Do you have any XYZ? You know, this or that?" Nope. She gave me a silent hey and brushed right past me. And only then, when the smell of my own shampoo hit me, did I notice her hair was wet. Like fresh out of the shower a minute ago wet. Now, I'm not saying she showered in my house or that I have a stalker that's been living in my house while I've been at work. He very easily could have just been there to ask for something, and the most generic brand shampoo smelled the same. But don't the pieces all fit together a bit too well? Her hair color matches the hairs I would find around my apartment, and like I said before, they were everywhere. In my bed too, and in my sock drawers. And if it is a case of me having a stalker, how did she know I came home early enough to bolt out of the shower in time? Our apartment doesn't have cameras. It's an older building from before 2000, and why would she be stalking me? For how long has she been doing this? We've never dated or had a proper conversation. I saw her maybe 20 times in the past 2 years, given that I work and she presumably studies or works too. All of these thoughts are buzzing through my head. I'm standing outside my door for a solid 2 minutes, grappling with what just happened. I go to turn the key to my door and it opens without me having to unlock it. And I know for a fact I always double lock my door. It's the type with a lock near waist level and a second more secure lock with a different key around shoulder level. I drop my bag, throw off my shoes, and run to the shower. And you guessed it, it's wet. I hadn't showered since yesterday morning. I'm a confrontational person. Not that I go looking for fights or anything, but I'll definitely pursue an answer if something is bugging me. So back down the stairs to the 3rd floor I went and knocked on the door of my apparent stalker and her family. She opens the door but with the chain still on. I see half of her face from behind the door. Yes? Can I help? Were you at my door or inside? I don't want to make this a police thing now, but you came down the stairs just now and I know you were inside. I just had to get something. It won't happen again. Okay. Bye, see ya. Door closed. This happened last month. I've been cleaning my house every weekend closely now and got the locks changed and put a motion sensor camera above my door. It only films and triggers on the steps coming up to my door, so the 4th apartment still has its privacy. So far so good. I don't think she's been inside since this. But looking back, I think she'd been living in or going into or whatever my apartment since January, because that's my earliest memory of finding hairs. She never took anything of value like my laptop or the few watches I have. Seemingly, she just showered and ate some of my food and lay in my bed. I do now also always take the elevator and avoid the 3rd floor like the plague. I have a bad habit of walking alone at night. I love it. I know it's not the best plan, as a small woman especially, but it is one of those things that just gives me joy. Speaks to my soul, I guess. As cheesy as it sounds. I do carry pepper spray and keep my phone in my hand. Man, hell if I'll let fear ruin something I love. Summer nights are the best. The light lingers forever in the Pacific Northwest. You get these endless twilights and there's this beautiful breath of coolness coming out of the dense screen, even when it's hot in the daytime. I lived in the desert as a teenager and I still just love the cool silky feeling air here. Silly, but I do. Soaking up the night air is amazing. I live in a small town at the head of a very long rural trail that winds through lowland marshy areas, dense woods and fields, and at night it is silent and isolated. 99.9% of the time, nobody is out there in the night except me, bats, and the rare bicyclist. Once you get outside city limits about a mile, a small town is small. There's nobody to mess with, so there's nobody looking to mess with you, if you get what I'm saying. The only houses are sparse and far across ravines and fields covered with blackberry cane with no streetlights, and no easy exit from the trail. I put one headphone in. I keep one out for me as a Zapata to date myself, and I walk for hours and miles. I usually take a big crossbody purse with a water bottle, my ID, a little bit of cash, and start to walk while the light leaves the sky. I only use my phone light when it gets pitch dark and absolutely necessary. This night I was far out into the boonies, just me and the maple trees kissing over the trail, and it was fully dark. Really deep dark by then, and I'm cruising along listening to a podcast in one ear with my little phone light. Beautiful night still. I'm just soaking it in, and I have been out here for a few hours and heading back, but still some miles out. Suddenly, there's this extra black patch, like a big splotch resolving itself out of the dense shadows across the trail. It took me a second to realize, oh yeah, that's not a trick of the light, it's actually something. It's a big black mass all across the trail in front of me. Not moving, but it's blocking the trail. I start getting the creeps. Chills. This is not normal, yet it's between me and home. There's no other choice, so I slowly creep up to whatever it is, a black puddle. Then as I get close, I see blood smear. Not a lot, but man, there are traces of blood on the paved trail. I put the big girl panties on and walked close. Phone cued to 911. The shadow resolved itself into a dude in a big flappy black coat, sprawled across the whole trail, surrounded by small bloodstains. So, I say, "Hey man, are you alright?" In surprise, the guy sits up. He's sunburnt and grimy but coherent, and kind of chipper. He goes, "Yeah, I'm okay, just resting. Hey, you got any water?" I forked over my water bottle and told him to go ahead and keep it. He took it and thanked me. He had scraped his bare foot and wandered around for a bit before deciding to take a breather, which was what the blood was from. I recognized him. He's a local meth head and drunk. He's either slightly drunk and kind of peaceful or belligerent on meth. Today, he was sobering up and tired. I asked him if I could call anyone, like 911 or whatever. Nope, just chilling. I carefully skirted around him and headed back home. I did not have particularly warm and cozy feelings about him, having hosed his puke off my porch a couple of times and have been called the "see you next Tuesday" word more than once by him. So, I left it at that. Anyway, a few months later, he attacked a random tourist with a machete downtown in broad daylight, sliced their leg open and went to prison. The first thing I'm going to say is that this is totally real, and I was freaked out of my wits for days. I don't think I could make some of this stuff up. Everybody I tell it to says that it is terrifying, and after reading through some of the stories on the subreddit, I think it would be a good fit. It was February of 2014. This thing I was doing at work kind of came to a head all at once, and I was basically going to have to spend the entire weekend writing a press release that was needed the following Monday by 10 a.m. Now, my grandparents own some property way out in the boonies of East Texas. I grew up going out there all the time for family get-togethers and whatnot. Now, since it was only a 45-minute drive away from where I lived, I would go out there with friends to camp and party, whatever. Well, I knew I was going to be riding all weekend. I thought, why not spend it in the great outdoors instead of holed up in my apartment in Houston? I had never stayed out there by myself, but had always been keen on the idea and thought this would be an excellent time to do it. I called my granddad asking if it would be okay for me to use the place for the weekend, and he said of course. He did seem a little reluctant about me doing it alone, but I was a 24-year-old guy who had grown up hiking and felt totally competent to handle anything that might happen. Honestly, at the time, I was a little bit insulted when he seemed to think me going out there by myself was not the best idea. He made sure I knew how to turn on the electricity and water. We use a well for water and have a big switch that turns on and off the electricity out there. Which, of course, I did. I'd only done it a million times when I brought friends. He asked if I had a key, which, again, of course, I did. Finally, he said, "You know where I keep the Henry, right?" My granddad is kind of a cowboy and keeps a big 30-30 Henry repeater out there mainly for shooting whitetail. But you never know. "Yeah," I said, admittedly for the first time. Nervous since, to my knowledge, he was the only one who had ever stayed out there by himself, and he had never really talked to me about his guns. The only shooting I had done out there was with a pellet gun as a kid, and then a camera as I got older. The drive out was nice after I got out of the city. I left work at 4:30, already packed, and drove straight there. With traffic, frickin' Houston. I made it out there by about 6:45. Still light outside, but it was beginning to turn to dusk. I took my duffel bag out of the trunk and went inside. The house is more like a small resort than a ranch house. It's really nice, which is why I enjoy talking to people out there so much. My granddad was pretty well off and had the place built when he retired. It has 12 bedrooms, and I choose the upstairs sort of master bedroom, if you can call it that. I unpacked, sat on the bed, and opened my laptop to look at what I had to write and immediately closed it. Screw that, I thought. I'll work on that tomorrow. Now I want to take a walk. There is a trail that goes in a big circle around the perimeter of the property and is about 3.5 miles. It was dark out now, and the thought briefly crossed my mind to bring my granddad's gun, but I decided on a sturdy 5-foot wooden dowel instead so I could have a walking stick and wouldn't slip in the dark and shoot my foot off or something. I put on a hoodie, grabbed a flashlight, and started off. It was a clear moonless night, and the swath of the Milky Way across the sky was impressive, but it was still really dark out. I didn't use my flashlight so my eyes would adjust, and after about 10 or so minutes, I could see reasonably well. It was nice. Chilly, but nice. After about a mile and a half, I decided to cut the route short through the woods and head back. I know the land so well that I could easily get back to the house from any point on the property. The woods and brush were pretty dense, though, and I was forced to turn on the flashlight. A thick wall of twigs and vines is revealed. I push through it with my stick, getting a couple of scratches when I see something deeper in the woods, partially obscured by the underbrush. It looks like somebody left a pile of clothes in the woods. I keep the light trained on it for a second or two, trying to see what it is. Suddenly, it jumps up really fast and sprints away further into the forest. My heart is in my throat and my stomach does a somersault. I feel the pins and needles of an adrenaline surge all over. With all the force I can muster, I try to shout, "Who is that?" But I have no idea what it actually sounded like. Immediately, I regretted not having that rifle, but heck, I even left my cell phone on the bed. The worst part of it is, whoever that guy was took off in the direction of the house, and I can't remember if I locked the door. Now that the initial shock began to wear off, the real fear begins. It is suddenly very cold. Never before have I felt so violated and stupid. I should have never come out here totally by myself. If this guy shoots at me or something, nobody will even miss me until Monday. Okay, get a hold of yourself. You need to get your phone. I walk a mile through the woods terrified. The woods end about 150 yards from the house's front patio, and I basically sprint it. Now, for any of you who have been in a situation like this, you know that running does not help. You feel that gut-wrenching panic, getting a foothold, and constantly think something is right on your heels. When I get to the front door in this semi-sane state, I am in for another shock since the door is cracked open and I can't remember if I did it or not. I have to go inside. I push the door open, holding the dowel sort of like a baseball bat, and immediately hear shrieking coming from the living room. I don't think I have ever been as close to blind terror as I was at that moment. I would not have been able to speak. A strangled noise escaped my throat, but I was hardly aware of it. I sprinted up the stairs and into the room where my stuff is, at every turn expecting to see some horrific rotted corpse shrieking at me. I don't know why, but at that moment, that is exactly what I thought I would see. I slam the door behind me and hear the scream again, from directly below me this time. I run into the bathroom and dial the police, locking the door and hiding in the shower. In retrospect, this seems like a really bitchy thing to do, but every ounce of bravado I had was long since drained. I tried to describe what was happening on the phone, but I'm not sure how much sense it made. There is a little town about 9 miles away from our property, and that is where the nearest police station is. It took them, I would say, 20 minutes to arrive, during which I heard the scream one more time. It was a lower pitch now and sounded strangled. Then came the freaking flashing red and blue lights through the window. I was still in the shower when I heard a man shout, "Please, anyone here? Come out." I got up and opened the bathroom door and heard a voice downstairs. Shit, Evans called an ambulance. I opened the bedroom door and a cop down the hall has a gun on me, saying, "Freeze." I try to explain that this is my family's place and I am the caller, but they still handcuff me. I soon see why. In the living room is the man I saw in the woods on his back, staring blankly upward, one arm outstretched at the ceiling and the other bent but still reaching upward. His head was lying in a pool of blood. We eventually get it cleared up who is who, and that I didn't crack that guy over the head with anything. Later, I find out that this guy was a paranoid schizophrenic, probably a homeless man who had wandered onto our property. It's hard to tell from where. We still don't know why he was bleeding, blunt force trauma of some sort, maybe a fall. So, insane dude. He basically gave me like 3 heart attacks, so let's not meet. And I'm pretty sure if it was my granddad instead of me out there, he could have gotten shot. I did, however, get the press release done by Monday. When I was 6 or 7, I had an awesome best friend who lived in the apartment complex right across from me. She and I used to go roving around on adventures, helping the older folks in the complex get around. It was the 90s in a small town, so our hard-working single moms didn't worry too much if we got off the bus before they got off work. They told us to always stick together no matter what, not talk to strangers, and stay close to the section of the complex that we lived in. and never go to the playground at the top of the hill by ourselves. Naturally, being 6 or 7 years old and 8 or 9, we were pretty obedient until one day when they were way louder than usual. We were bored out of our tiny noggins and thought it would be a brilliant idea to hike the massive hill and go play on the playground. So up we went and all was well. At least for a few minutes. My spidey senses started tingling, and when I turned around, there was a man standing there. He didn't look creepy or anything to me. Just a normal younger dude wearing a burgundy sweater and khakis. I looked around to see if he had brought his kids up or something, but I didn't see any. I grabbed the swing that I had been pushing my friend down and made it stop, whispering to her that there was a man behind us. She looked behind us and stood up quickly. "It's okay. You two can keep playing," he said in a very soft, quiet voice. My friend spoke up. "Nah, we were just leaving anyways." She grabbed my hand and we began to walk away. "If you want, I have a jungle gym across from my apartment and we can go play there," he said, moving closer to us. We backed away, still hand in hand, both of our red flag sensors going wild. "I like watching you two play. You are very pretty," he continued, moving in longer strides. Needless to say, we booked it. Taking off down the hill at breakneck kid speed, we looked behind us to see him chasing us, and we both started screaming. A little more than halfway down the hill, we saw both of our moms standing by their cars, talking and smoking it. When they heard us, they immediately started sprinting to us. Apparently, the man realized who they were, and he started taking off across the vast parking lot back to his apartment. Our mom scolded us something fierce and explained to us that what happened was the exact reason we were never supposed to go that far from our neighbors ever again. So this just happened moments ago. I had just finished one of my classes at university for the day and was on my way to another when all of a sudden I was stopped by this random guy. He had told me he saw me around my building a few times and just had to introduce himself, so he did. And I stupidly said my first name, which I regret. Then he started saying how I looked nice today, and since he kept magically seeing me around, it must be fate, and he wanted to ask me out. I said no and that I was a lesbian and only liked girls. He then proceeded to ask how lesbians work because he was from a place where it was considered taboo. He then even creepily said, so even if we went at it, implying sex, I wouldn't even have to stick it in. I do as a lesbian does. As if that were the same. I said no, not the same at all, and tried to end it at that because I was thoroughly disturbed he would just assume that I'd have sex with him in the first place. But then he carried on with saying, I'm from Dubai. I am rich and have money. Can you be what Americans call a sugar baby? And kept pushing those types of things to get me to somehow be interested. Finally, he started to get the message that I wasn't going to agree to anything that he wanted and said, if I see you a fifth time, we're destined to get married. In a joking tone, but it still came off creepy. Once he walked away, I felt so disturbed and wondered how he saw me so often when our classes had only just started and how he lacked any social clues or understanding that what he asked wasn't okay. I'm really hoping I don't bump into him again. I'm making this short for a plethora of reasons. I was 22 at the time. I was a full-time model and also working for a writer and intelligent man who I looked up to and respected greatly. In fact, I looked at him as a father figure who would always protect me and have my best interest at heart. But that was not the case, unfortunately. He was a pioneer in something regarding computers, a photographer, and many other things. Now, the first 2 years I worked as his personal assistant, things were fine. He was definitely odd, but I like weird people because I'm weird myself. I learned a lot from working for him. That time period in my life is a combination of a David Lynch movie, a fever dream, a Lana Del Rey record, and isolation. So let's just get right into the night I still have nightmares about. My boss and I were working in his country house in upstate New York. This wasn't out of the ordinary at all. We went up there to work on his book and for me to do research and put together files, organize, etc. I had my own room and the place was gorgeous. It was completely desolate and eerie at the same time, but again, I felt safe with him and enjoyed being up there until this one night. I had a photo shoot the next morning in Connecticut where my boss would be driving me and his friend was the photographer and he claimed he had business to do with Lewis, the photographer. We worked all day the night prior to my shoot. When evening came around, my boss and I smoked a joint or three and talked. I had a couple of drinks and so did he. I decided to have one more cigarette before going to my bedroom. His bedroom was on the top floor and mine was next to the front door, In the first bedroom to the left, across from my room, was my boss's office, where he would often be writing his books. He was a night owl and got a lot of writing done at night. I was starting to doze off when I saw a light coming from the bottom of my door, so I figured the boss went to go work in his office across from my room, which startled me. I heard him talking to someone and I assumed he couldn't sleep, so he went to his office to write. I heard a strange old song playing on his record player. I thought this was odd. I cracked my door open a bit and saw my boss in my pink dress. Couldn't believe what I was seeing. My life has always been weird, but this one took the cake. He was dancing in my dress and talking to himself. I heard him say, "I am." And then he was saying my stage name in different creepy tones. That is extremely weird. He had bright red lipstick on, and suddenly he dropped to the floor, which scared the living shit out of me and made me gasp and cover my mouth. I put my hand over my mouth to avoid making any sound. He lay face down on his stomach and started humping the ground. This is when I got so freaked out I shut the door and locked it. I softly walked back in my bed and pulled the covers up to my eyes. I was literally hyperventilating and a brutal anxiety attack came on. I felt like my heart was coming out of my chest. I took my anxiety meds and I remember trembling, trying not to make noise. After about 15 minutes, I saw him come up to my door and he was standing there not moving. I was completely frozen. He stood there and suddenly walked away. He turned the lights off in his office, past my door, and I heard him walk upstairs to his bedroom. The next morning I went to get coffee and have breakfast, and there he was at the kitchen table, flipping through the paper in his usual suit. I sat down and had some coffee, and my boss talked to me like nothing had happened. I decided to go get ready and get my things together for the photo shoot. I didn't feel safe anymore for many reasons. This man ended up manipulating, grooming, and just straight up mind-screwing me for years to come. We never talked about that night, but that was the last time I ever stayed at his country house in the middle of nowhere. Also, I found the dress he was wearing and it smelled like BO and creepy old man. I threw that dress out and just buried the memory of this happening. You really had to be there to understand the magnitude of how creepy this was and how creepy he was and is. So, creepy jerk that I never want to see again. He took advantage of a young girl with talent who already had anxiety and PTSD and made it 10 times worse. I often think, what was his intention that night? This is one of the many awful experiences I had working for and with this guy. Ladies, please be careful about who you let into your life. Never be afraid to stick up for yourself. Always trust your gut and get as far away from predators and manipulative people as possible. Rest in peace to my pink dress and my sanity. I witnessed something late at night on the 4th of July that I feel the need to share. Bear with me here because I'm not a great storyteller, but I wrote down all of the events and even drew a map of where everything occurred immediately after so I would never forget. To give some context, I'm a weirdo and I spend a lot of my time hiking. I've been dealing with serious emotional and mental distress, brought on by things which are out of my control. My way of coping and finding comfort is by being a weirdo and tempting fate, by going for late night hikes. Turns out that I made the right decision by going out to the countryside late that night to enjoy the view of the full moon and see the fireflies shine deep in the woods and across the fields. I parked my car at an unmarked pull-off next to the river, which is surrounded by dense forests and unforgiving swamps. I started on my way on foot at approximately 11:30 p.m. I may or may not have had a few White Claws stuffed into my backpack, but that's beside the point. After walking for about 2.5, mostly uneventful hours, I decided it was time to double back and go find my car. This is the part where things go from I feel a bit better and more at ease to damn, what the ever-loving heck have I stumbled onto? I began crossing the bridge to get to my car, which was still roughly 3 miles to the west of where I was on the bridge at the time, when I heard footsteps on the asphalt approaching me from behind. My mood shifts to make my day. I am so ready to cut you if you even think about attacking me. I whip around and see a man wearing all black, who was much closer than what it sounded like. We make eye contact. Full moon, pretty easy to see at night, and this dude breaks into a full-ass sprint towards me, but then veers around me at the last minute. Maybe it was the liquid courage or pure adrenaline, but I yelled out to the guy, "Hey man, you good?" "Sup?" And he replies, "I gotta get to my wife." Swiftly veers around me and keeps running. I'm thinking to myself, okay, kinda weird considering it's, 12 o'clock in the middle of nowhere. But I digress. He runs out of sight. I keep walking to my car. I make it about 1.5 miles further when I hear a woman screaming, crying, and wailing. The kind that makes your hair stand up, and the kind that tells you in your gut that something is horribly wrong. I stop and listen as best as I can. Through her sobs, I hear her say, "Please, I can't take it. I don't want any more." At this point, I wanted to throw up. Her screams were coming from the same path I had to take to get to my car. I channeled the energy of the movie Tropic Thunder and went full Viet Cong, dived into the bushes, and stealthily made my way closer to see what the heck is going on and find this screaming woman. It didn't take long, because I now see the same man that ran past me earlier and a second much larger man, also dressed in black, walking on the road coming back in my direction. The larger man had the woman slung over his shoulder like she was a sack of potatoes. She wasn't screaming anymore, but she was crying and completely incoherent. She looked like she was maybe 19 to 21 at most, with blonde hair and very small. I'd say 110 pounds or less. I popped out of the tree line and asked man number 1, "Is that your wife? Is everything okay?" He said, "Yeah, she's fine. She just can't handle her liquor." As he said this, both men continued walking past me. The woman is clearly not drunk, but appears to be drugged. She was trying to talk, but her speech was very slurred, and she could not even lift her arms or head to get out of this man's grasp. To the best of her ability, the woman keeps trying to say, "Please, no, help." She was trying so hard to lift her head and look at me and reach her arms out to me, but she was so weakened by whatever they had done to her that she was incapable of even making out a single word. Something was very wrong. Something much more than alcohol. Not 15 minutes prior, I was able to hear her screaming actual words, and now she appears barely conscious. I carry pepper gels and razor blades when I hike. However, I knew there was no way I could take on 2 men by trying my hand at some vigilante justice. I'm about 5'6" and 140 pounds, and definitely no match for 2 men twice my size. Self-preservation and survival mode kick in for me and for my fellow woman, and I say to man number 1, "Oh yeah, man, I've been there before. I'm sure she'll just sleep it off and be fine." Please understand, I only said this to him as a means of playing dumb. Again, I am not equipped to take down 2 men. The woman tries to cry and plead more as they carry her away, and I was quite honestly terrified. That sight and the connection I felt between me and the woman pleading for help is something I'll never forget. Once they were maybe 20 feet behind me, I took a glance over my shoulder to see what was happening, because the slurred cries she was letting out were nauseating. I wanted to be sure that they weren't harming her further. I see they have stopped in the road and are looking back at me. It took everything in me to be cool, act as though I didn't notice them and couldn't care less what they were up to. Again, probably call it self-preservation, or whatever you want. They began walking further away from me then. I quickened my pace to go hide behind a sloped railway track, out of their view. So I called 911. I described to the dispatcher and officer what I've just seen and that I believe that this woman was taken against her will and appeared to be drugged. The officer and dispatcher on the other line says, "Yeah, we've got 2 other calls earlier tonight. We'll go ahead and work on sending someone out." Great police work, my dudes. Keep in mind, this is one of those out in the boonies, and most people seem to think that sort of thing doesn't happen around here, even though we have an extensive number of cold cases of women and children here in this area. I'm only a mile away from my car now. Obviously, the police gave approximately 2 shits about this woman's safety. But I was so disturbed by what I saw that I knew it was time to go find these guys myself, since it seemed like no one else was going to. Side note, the amount of cigarettes I smoke in a day is roughly equivalent to the amount of toilet paper sold during this pandemic. Yeah, I was huffing a cigarette, crying silently, praying for her safety. Praying they wouldn't disappear with her to who knows where and do who knows what. What I'm saying is, I freaking ran like never before to get to my car and track those men down again before they could drop out of sight with her. Obviously, I didn't personally know this woman, but I'll be damned if I don't do everything I can do to help her when she was clearly in danger and unable to help herself. I floored it to where I saw them last. Maybe 20 minutes had passed between the last time we crossed paths, and I got to my car. And much to my relief, as I rounded the corner, I saw multiple police units on scene up the road. I drove up closer just to be sure they found the right guys, and they did. They had the men up against their cruisers with their hands up and were being frisked. Paramedics were on the scene. This poor woman was lying on the ground as they were working to place her on a stretcher to get her to a hospital, I assume. The sense of relief I felt was unreal. Probably not even a fraction of the relief this woman felt when the police finally intervened. Dispatch actually called me back and advised they had not sent officers previously, as the situation described to them as a noise disturbance. Not unusual for a holiday weekend, so I cannot wholly blame them for not coming sooner, since they had not received any calls specifically stating there was a woman screaming for help or being carried off caveman style against her will in the middle of nowhere in the wee hours of the night. Needless to say, I didn't sleep at all the rest of the night. I went home and cried all day, mostly out of the horror of what I saw and the awful thought of what if I hadn't taken that walk? What if no one had been there to help? What if they would have grabbed me too? So, I'll close with this. Do not be a bystander. If you see something, say something. So, I work at a pizza place. Usually inside, as my insurance does not cover claims when driving for business, but occasionally I will cover a delivery shift for one of the drivers because the money is good. Our delivery area includes a few new development upper middle class, cookie cutter neighborhoods, bad tips and older 1940s era village, average tips, 2 apartment complexes, great tips, some trailer parks, great tips or no trips, no in between, and a bunch of rural areas, usually good tips. Not rural to the point of seeing hundreds of stars at night, but enough that you couldn't hear your neighbors yell. So, about a week ago, I was covering a delivery shift. I came back to the shop feeling pretty good. I was averaging $5 a delivery, and they had all been pretty close by, and checked to see if I had any more. I have one to an address I have never seen before. We have mostly semi-regular customers getting deliveries, so an address that doesn't seem the least bit familiar is a little odd. It's out in one of the more rural roads. I asked the kid who took the order what was up because there were special instructions on the ticket. He says, they said to go around back because the front door is not operational. I'm like, okay, that's not that uncommon. People often want you to go around back. Either they painted the door, the house shifted and it's a bitch to open, or they're just hanging out back. So as I'm driving out to the house, I get an odd feeling. I don't really like the idea of going to the back of some house out in the sticks. It would all be too easy for some thugs to order a pizza to an abandoned house. There are quite a few in the more rural areas, and then jump the delivery guy. I figure I'll scope the place out when I get there, and if it seems sketchy, just call them and make some bull up about how it's against company policy to go around the back of the house to prevent robberies. As I'm driving to the house, I realize it's towards the end of this road that gets less populated the further down you go. Great. I'm pretty near the address and driving slow. I see this house abandoned looking and set back from the roads with no address and in a bunch of trees. I think, that house better not be it. So I drive past and check the next house's address, and lo and behold, that abandoned looking one was the right one. At this point I'm not super worried though, because out in the boonies the standards of upkeep on your house are pretty low, so a house in disrepair isn't unusual. So I double back to this house and pull into the driveway. At this point I'm getting bad vibes, it doesn't feel right. I park my car at the very end of the driveway with the rear of the car on the shoulder so anybody passing by can clearly see it. At this point, I call back to the shop and tell them I'm at this sketchy house, and if I don't call back in 4 or 5 minutes, to call me, and if I don't answer, call the cops. While I am on the phone, I take a chance to take a good look at the house. It looks extremely abandoned and not just in disrepair. The driveway is crumbling, bits of gravel, and there are weeds growing out of it. There is no mailbox, no trash cans, no car or lawnmowers, no landscaping, no kids' toys. Absolutely nothing in the yard. The yard hasn't been mowed in what looks like years, really. The house is total crap. The roof is all but falling apart and the siding is falling apart. The back deck, which comes around the side, is also falling apart. The only part of the house that looks even a little bit decent is the allegedly non-functioning front door. The windows are all shut. It's 95 degrees and humid, and this place doesn't have AC. They all have the blinds or curtains shut. The few that are actually boarded up. I don't even see any wires running to this house. It's not dark but dusk, and there isn't a sign of any lights on in the house. At this point, I am starting to get pretty nervous. I am a 5'10" male, 180 pounds, not in any great shape, but I did take karate for 10 years, so I'm not completely helpless. But I do try to avoid any sort of confrontation I can, as I am mostly a pacifist. I'm not too concerned about getting robbed. No skin off my teeth. It's not my money. I mean, I would rather not get robbed, but I'm mostly worried about getting jumped or killed. It's a fairly safe area, but recently there have been some rather unsavory people moving in from the city. A big spike in home invasions and robberies, but more worrying. A few stabbings and assaults, so it's either time to nut up or shut up, and I'm not going to go in charging like a freaking fool. So I get out my phone and call the number they gave when ordering. While I'm doing that, I'm also getting the pizza out and making sure to leave my door open. A running car half in the road at an abandoned house with the door open looks suspicious, right? I figure if something goes down, it might look out of place enough to make somebody stop. Not that there is really any traffic this far down the road. I'm starting to walk up to the house while the phone's ringing. It rings twice and then an automated message comes on. It says something along the lines of this number being associated with an internet texting app. One of those free ones you download and let you send free text from a different phone number over a data connection. I think it was haywire. We have had issues with people using numbers from those services for pranks in the past. This is a pretty big red flag. My heart is now pounding in my throat and my whole body is telling me to bail. I don't want to get a reputation for being a flaky bitch as a driver and lose any future delivery shifts, and that is why I have not bailed yet. So I am just standing there holding a pizza looking at this house but not wanting to venture around to the back of it. I'm hoping that the resident will look out the window and come out by the road to get their food. So I am looking at the front windows, checking for some sign of life. I see a blind go up on the one window next to the front door and a really creepy looking guy with a hat pulled low and big sunglasses on is looking out. Remember, he is in a completely dark house surrounded by trees. At dusk, there is no reason for him to be wearing sunglasses. I also see what appears to be a big guy standing behind him in the room. This could have been anything though. When he sees me looking, he mouths something and he darts away, presumably towards the allegedly broken front door. At this point, I noped the heck out. I stayed pretty close to my car, so it was only a few steps away, so I jumped into the driver's seat and threw the pizza into my passenger seat. Something I would never do since I am really anal about keeping my car clean. I slam it into reverse before I get the clutch all the way in, so I grind my gears a little bit. Again, something I never do. Without looking, I simultaneously slam and lock my door and floor it backwards on the main road, slipping my clutch horribly, but at this point, I don't care. I don't want to screw around and risk a stall. I didn't even check for cross traffic, which was also really stupid on my part. I start to drive away and look at the house. The screen door on the outside of the front door is now open, but the front is still shut. The guy isn't out in the yard yelling, "Wait, come back," or anything. He's just gone. So I pull over a little ways up the road to call back to the shop and tell them I'm all good, and I'll elaborate when I get back. The people never call back to inquire about their food. People usually call if their pizza is 15 minutes late here, and these people never got it, so it's really strange they didn't call. Pretty much confirming they were up to no good. After telling my coworkers about it, we conclude it was definitely a robbery at the very least, so we put the address and phone number on our no delivery list and ate their pizza. I doubt I would have actually got murdered or anything. Robbed with maybe a gun pulled or a little roughing up? Yes, but it was still very unnerving that I could have easily gotten into some serious trouble by just doing my job. Especially if the idiots picked a slightly less abandoned house to set up at. Sorry for the relatively minor incident being so long, but hey, I like to write even if I'm not that good at it. Anybody who delivers pizza, please be wary of situations like this. I looked into it, and apparently it's a pretty common way to rob pizza guys. I'm pretty glad we did not end up meeting. I've known about this subreddit for a while now, but I've never gotten around to telling my own story, which of course, I'd never thought I'd have to. Since it's long, I won't bother with a long intro. This is all you need to know. This happened in my senior year of college and I lived off campus. I had 2 roommates in my apartment, townhouse, named Natalie and Katie. Anyways, Katie was out that night doing homework in one of the school buildings and I was awoken at 3 a.m. when I heard some knocking at the door downstairs. I thought that was weird considering the hour, but I figured somebody had the wrong place and would realize and leave. But the knocking didn't stop, and I lay in bed for a good several minutes thinking, yeah, they'll go away now. They'll go away and they'll get bored. As one might expect though, I started to grow confused and then kind of freaked out by this person's persistence. Then the knocking turned into banging and I couldn't ignore it anymore. Honestly, I probably should have called the police, but it was the middle of the night and I was confused, so I headed to the top of the stairs to see Natalie standing near the door staring at it. Her room was on the bottom floor, so she had just walked up to it. We exchanged a baffled look because what the heck? It's 3 a.m. Natalie called out and asked them who they were and what they wanted. "We're friends of Katie's," said the voice on the other end, who sounded male and about our age. "We know her boyfriend and we heard she was feeling down, so we came to surprise her." That was already a weird story because again, 3 in the morning. But thankfully, Katie wasn't even home, so we both informed them of this. "Katie's not here. She's off doing something else." "Good. They're going to leave, right?" "They came here to see Katie. She's not here, so they will leave us alone and we can go back to sleep." "How about you just open the door?" he said. I know. If I hadn't called the police before, I definitely should have done it now. It was weird though. That night I realized why people do stupid stuff in horror films. Not only had I been waken up out of nowhere, but it also feels surreal to be in a situation like this. Like there's no way you could actually be in danger. That only happens in horror movies and true crime documentaries and in questionable creepy stories online. It could never happen to me. I'm just a random, ordinary, boring person going about my business. I don't need to call the police. I'm sure this will get cleared up and everything will be fine. So yeah, Natalie and I did the stupid thing and tried to argue with them. We told them that again Katie wasn't here. There was no need for them to stay. Eventually, Natalie asked what their names were. Throughout the encounter, we made out 2 distinct voices, but only one gave us a name. And I texted Katie without telling her, asking if she was friends with somebody with that name. After a couple of minutes, during which we were still arguing with the stranger, Katie replied, "I am, but I don't think she knows where I live." That wasn't good, but even worse was she. The person on the other side of the door had a male voice, so this was a real name, but not the real person. Whoever this was knew stuff about Katie, like who she hung out with. I told Katie to stay where she was and not to come back until we told her everything was okay. Finally, we told the guys that if they didn't leave, we were going to call the police. No. Don't call the police. Don't do that, okay? If we wanted to do something bad, we would have done it already. Yeah, that last bit wasn't helping their case. Just open the door, alright? The attempts at reasoning with them basically devolved into them telling us, just open the door, over and over again until we finally actually did call the police. We hid in Natalie's room and dialed 911 and explained what was going on. Thankfully, there was a police station close by, so it wouldn't take long for them to arrive. Unfortunately, I made the mistake of heading back into the living room and yelling through the door that we called the cops, but contrary to what you might think, that actually didn't seem to scare them. They only seemed mildly upset and kept arguing. To this day, I can only assume they just didn't believe us or something. Then we heard a neighboring home's door swing open in a very pissed off man's voice. "If you don't leave right now, I'm calling the police." For whatever reason, that's what caused them to freak out and they drove off. The police arrived and we told them the story. Natalie revealed that a couple of times she had just barely peeked through the blinds of a window close to the front door, and she noted that there were 2 guys, but only one of them was ever at the door at any given time. They would switch with one at the door and the other sitting at the driver's seat of a car parked out front, presumably for getaway purposes. So yeah, that's reassuring. They also hadn't looked drunk, according to Natalie, and they definitely hadn't sounded like they were. There wasn't much the police could do besides sweep the area a bit, but they told us that if the stranger showed up again, to immediately call instead of engaging with them at all. One of the officers did give us some self-defense tactics and told us what kind of household items or chemicals would work best for self-defense. After making sure everything was okay and reassuring us, they left and we eventually called Katie and told her the weirdos were gone. She arrived and was understandably a bit shaken herself. We sat down and asked her who might have known where she lived. She didn't know people had come to the apartment, so some people certainly, but Natalie hadn't recognized the guys outside as any previous visitors. Worse, it turned out that not only did they know Katie's friend's name, but they claimed to know her boyfriend even though he didn't even live in the state where we were going to school. She swore up and down she didn't know anyone who would want to hurt her. By this point, it was around 5 a.m., so I didn't even bother going to sleep, since I was going to a workshop that morning. I told a lot of my classmates the story and it freaked them out too. And the entire day, Natalie and I jumped at every unexpected noise, shadow, every random movement. It was very hard to sleep. I expected to hear knocking at the door at any second. Thankfully, they didn't come back ever. But that almost makes things more unsettling to me, in a way. I'll never ever know what they wanted that night. Did they think we were hiding Katie? Was she seeing less than savory people in secret? Did they want to hurt her? If they did, why did they never give up and go looking for her elsewhere? Was all of that just an excuse to get into the apartment of young women? Did they want to kidnap us, hurt us, rob us? Who knows? I tried not to let it bother me, but I wish I knew if my life was in danger that night. I had the feeling it might have been. After all, they weren't wearing face coverings, so if they wanted to commit a violent crime, they might have wanted to get rid of witnesses. But despite how much I wish I knew, yeah, random strange men who insisted we let them inside for unknown reasons, that's not me. For context, I'm a college student and I live in the city alone. I'm particularly close to the border, so human trafficking is unfortunately common here and something I'm very aware of. Last week, I decided to make cinnamon rolls. I realized I didn't have any frosting, but it was still 7-something in the evening and kind of light outside, so I didn't feel nervous about running to the store to grab some. I was wearing a t-shirt, baggy sweats, and Crocs. This will be important later. For anybody that doesn't know, there are essentially 2 ways to wear Crocs. 1 with the strap on top of your foot, which is more casual, or 2 with the strap behind your heel, which is more secure. I always wear them with the strap on top of my foot because they're just barely too tight the other way, which makes it kind of uncomfortable. As I was walking down the stairs to the parking garage in my building, I had this thought in my head. You should flip the strap down on your shoes in case you need to run. I immediately thought that was weird because, like I said, I never wear them like that, and why the heck would I need to run? I argued with myself mentally for a minute, but as I got in my car, I decided to flip it anyway. In the store's parking garage, there are 3 ways to get in the store. 1. A sliding door with a ramp escalator, usually locked by 6 to 7. 2. An elevator. Or 3. Exit the garage, walk around the block, and enter through the front door. I usually go up the ramp, but since it was locked, I parked near the elevator. I also parked with a few of those big cement poles on my left so nobody could park on that side of me and pull me into a car or something. I walked over to the elevator, pushed the button, and all the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The elevator is really slow, so I had a second to process this and try to figure out why I suddenly felt so panicked. As I was trying to convince myself that I was crazy and there was nothing wrong, I looked to my right and saw a car driving up kind of fast. There were dents and paint chips all over it, and the front right headlight was smashed. The panicked feeling was screaming at me at this point, and right before they stopped behind me, my gut told me I needed to run. I'm decently athletic, but I am not a runner. I don't know what gave me the power to run as fast as I did, but I ran all the way out of the garage and around the block to the front of the store. I could hear their tires screeching through the garage, but I didn't stop or turn around. I was shaking like a leaf by the time I got in, but didn't want to go to my car because whoever that was could obviously just follow me. I saw them fly past the front of the store and finally felt safe. I assumed they were gone. I walked a few laps through the aisles trying to collect myself, grabbing the frosting and checked out. The entire time I was in the store, I kept trying to logically explain what just happened. Maybe the guy on the passenger side was injured and that's why they were coming so close to the elevator. Maybe they needed to ask me a question. Or maybe they think I'm absolutely psychotic for breaking into a sprint in the middle of the parking garage. But why did I hear tires screeching? I started walking towards the elevator to go back downstairs, telling myself I'm insane for being so scared. The panicked feeling came back in my stomach even stronger, to the point that I felt nauseous. I worked up the courage to ask a security guard to walk me to my car. I'm a really shy person, so asking a stranger for help isn't something I'm likely to do. He agreed and was really nice and helpful. We went down the elevator together and made small talk. He could tell I was scared and told me if I ever needed anything, what days he'd be working and who worked the days he was not. As we stepped out of the elevator, the car from earlier was now parked diagonally in front of me, blocking me in. When they saw the security guard, they took off and I hadn't seen that car since. I don't know why they were waiting for me, and part of me is still trying to come up with some sort of justification as to why they did that. But all I know is whatever told me to fix my shoes in case I needed to run was right, and I'm never going back to that store again. Quick update. I'm currently sitting in a new apartment, still downtown because I love my city, but much safer than my last one. Somebody had commented on this story in another thread about how if this was trafficking, I should be careful because they likely had studied my actions. And prior to this incident, I did have a bit of a schedule for things, which I am now working towards being more random about. The last building I lived in had massive safety concerns. Somebody had tried to open my front door multiple times. I'm assuming it was someone that got in the building and was just looking for an unlocked door to steal a TV or something. But regardless, that's obviously still dangerous and the building was not secure. There were key fobs for all entrances, but as soon as you got in the building, you had full access to the gym, mailroom, computer room, courtyards, garages, elevators, any floor and stairwells. The streets around my old building had a lot of shit happening around there too. So the chances of random people getting into my building were high. It was also a pretty small building, only 4 floors, and my apartment was on the top floor with the balcony facing the city, so it was pretty easy for somebody to watch me on my balcony anytime I was out there, which freaks me out. I'm now in a building that has stairwells with fobbed gates every few floors. Elevators require a fob for any floor. Parking garages have multiple security officers walking through at all times, as well as security that patrols the pool area and any offices or lounge areas you can do work in. I'm also higher up than in my last building, so I feel a lot safer and more secluded. I've driven through the parking lot or parking garage of that store a few times just to see if they're in there, and I think I may have seen the car a few times again, but I'm not sure. There are no license plates anymore if it is the same one. Same headlights smashed and dents all over. I found a different store that's a bit further but much safer. I hadn't realized how much I looked over my shoulder while I was in the other store, and I still do, but so much less. I've also tried to report this to the police department, and we've set up multiple times for calls, and they've never replied to any of them. They also refused to hear the story through an email. They said the only way to notify them was calling. Also tried to report it to a human trafficking detective that doesn't work at the police department, but elsewhere in my area, and they never emailed me back about it either. I'll still try, but I just wanted y'all to know. This is probably one of the scariest encounters I've ever had, and I was never able to find out who it was. A few years ago, I had moved into a new apartment building closer to my family. There were only 6 units, 3 on each side, each stacked on top of each other with the main door to the building set in the very middle and the interior staircase splitting each set of apartments. The second and third floor apartments each had their own little balcony, with the second floor apartments' balconies being close enough to the ground that you could probably jump off without hurting yourself. As a forgetful and clumsy person, and as soon as I noticed this, I thought to myself, awesome, if I ever accidentally lock the sliding glass door behind me, I can easily hop down and go pick my second set of keys from my mom. I say all of this because I've lived in one of those second floor apartments, and I should have been more concerned about how easy it would be for somebody to climb up, rather than how easy I could potentially get down. My first few months go great. I like my neighbors and my landlord is super chill too. I start dating a guy who lives in the same neighborhood, and soon enough he starts spending the night frequently. At this point it's October and the weather is finally cooling off. I turn off my AC and open all of my windows and blinds. I'm on the second floor and nobody could possibly see in, right? As it goes in the honeymoon stage, my new boyfriend and I are having sex a lot. Just about every room in my apartment more than once. We are both kind of loud at times, but the walls in this complex are thick and we never hear my neighbors, not even them walking or vacuuming, so we never bother to try to quiet down. During the 3rd week of October, we are cooking dinner in the kitchen, which is next to the living room where the front door is, when we hear a knock on the front door. Nobody was supposed to be coming over, and the apartment across the hall from me constantly had people in and out who occasionally knocked on my door by mistake. So we just assume that's what's happening and make no move to check. We pause and wait for another knock. Nothing comes. A few minutes go by with no other knocking, so we continue to cook. I faintly hear what sounds like metal hitting metal. I hush my boyfriend and we both pause, listening intently. Softly, the doorknob rattles like somebody is trying to open it. It rattles again, and then I hear that metal on metal scratching sound again. I look at my boyfriend and his eyes are wide. He whispers, "Somebody's trying to pick your lock." Me, being young, impulsive, and somewhat naive at this time, instantly thinks, "Nah, no way. This is definitely somebody trying to get in the wrong apartment." Without a second thought, I start crossing the room to open the door and give whoever this poor person is directions to wherever they're trying to get to. My boyfriend runs after me, grabs my arm a second before I unlock the door, and yells. Whispered threats. What the heck are you doing? I'm about to yell back at him for not being neighborly when the next thing I hear is heavy footsteps flying down the hallway stairs and the front door bar latch slamming open. Uh-oh. I'm thinking at this point maybe he was right. We open the door a few moments later and nobody is there. My boyfriend inspects my door only to find imprints of what looked like the flat edge of a screwdriver in the wood of my door. We decide whoever was here tried to use a screwdriver to jimmy the lock but couldn't, and they ran away when they heard my boyfriend yell. At this point I'm more irritated and indignant than scared. I called my landlord and asked if there are cameras in the hallway, and he says no, there is not. I tell him what happened and he says he's sure it's somebody else's guest just trying to get in the wrong apartment and not to worry. He even says he's pretty sure those marks on my door were there before I moved in. Now I feel stupid and irrational, so I thanked him and decided to try to just forget about it. I still felt a bit paranoid though, so instead of leaving my balcony door open with just the screen in, like I usually did at night when I was home, I started keeping it shut and locked. About a week later, my boyfriend and I are lying in bed together at night while we watch a movie. The windows in my bedroom are open to let in the night air, and we are both starting to nod off. Suddenly, I hear what sounds like a moan right outside my window, which was pretty bizarre seeing as I'm on the second floor and the only thing below my window is some trees and overgrown weeds on a steep hillside. I brush it off, thinking it must have been a weird noise carried on the wind. Soon after, I very clearly hear my boyfriend say, "Oh shit," but as I look over at him, he's sleeping. I quickly wake him up and whisper for him to listen. His eyes slowly unglaze from sleep, and I see it in his face as he comes to the realization I did. Somebody is playing a very loud, very long recording of us having sex outside my window. We both walk over and try to look outside, but can't see anything in the pitch darkness. My boyfriend gets pissed and starts yelling out the window. Suddenly, the recording stops and is instead replaced with the creepiest, most evil male laugh I have ever heard in my life. It was the kind of sadistic laugh that instantly makes your stomach drop like you're on a roller coaster and your anxiety creep up and sit on the back of your neck. My boyfriend wanted to go outside to try to confront whoever this guy was, but I begged him to just stay inside with me. I had a gut feeling that whoever was out there would take just as much, if not more pleasure from hurting one of us than he did from recording us when we didn't know. I was so freaked out I moved out shortly after. Thankfully, as I said at the start, my landlord was super cool and didn't even charge me for breaking my lease when I gave him the sanitized version of what happened. After I handed him the keys, he thanked me for being an almost model tenant. This surprised me because to my knowledge I had never done anything that would make him upset or bother my neighbors. So I asked him what he meant. He laughed and said, "You were always so quiet and respectful. It was your one friend I couldn't stand." The building manager had to yell at him twice for going in through the balcony rather than the front door. For reference, the building manager lived in the apartment directly below mine on the first floor. My blood instantly went cold. I have never ever had anyone enter my apartment by climbing up my damn balcony. I pressed further and he didn't have too much more information. Just that some guy had been trying to enter my apartment by climbing up the balcony and going through the sliding door, and when questioned, had laughed it off and said I invited him over and told him to come in that way. Our building was secure, so the front door automatically locked and couldn't be opened without a key. The only explanation I have is that this guy was watching us and had tried to break in more than once. Who knows how many times he could have stood below my open windows and recorded the sound of us having sex. My only consolation was that my windows were high enough that he couldn't have videotaped us without using a ladder, and I'm hoping we would have been notified that at least. I did report it to the police, but they said without video footage or an identity, there wasn't much they could do unless it happened again, at which time I should call 911. Thankfully, I've never experienced anything similar since then, and I hope I never will. I-21 female used to live in a really bad neighborhood when I was a kid. Drive-by shootings were not uncommon. Rapes had happened in surrounding areas while we lived there. And before we moved, we also found out that the sweet man across the street was a certified sex offender. So obviously, not a great place for children to walk around alone, right? True, but if you have a 70-pound good boy that is completely dedicated to protecting you, it's doable. My mom, little brother in his stroller, I, and Spanky, my good boy, went for a walk around the neighborhood to go 2 blocks away to the community pool. I, like most 6-year-olds, wanted to wander ahead with my dog because he was always gentle when I held the lead and walked closely to me. As we were nearing the pool, there was a stretch of hedges that lined the walkway to the pool entrance. Spanky was walking ahead of me by maybe about 3 feet. He sniffed towards a bush and came to a complete stop. He began posturing and growling deeply, baring his teeth at the bush. He had never growled like this before, and to me, it was horrifying to see my best bud like this. I tried to walk around him, and he turned the back end of his body to block me, his eyes still fixed on the bush. I try again, and he does it yet again. My mom is still about 4 houses behind and hasn't noticed this yet. I see the bush start to move and take a step back. Mom, I think Spanky found the kitty. I start taking a step towards the bush, and I am knocked over completely by Spanky at this point. I'm crying on the ground, scraped elbow. No biggie, but it gets my mom to come running. Exactly at this moment, a man bolts out from the bush and takes off running. When Spanky knocked me over, it made me drop his leash, so he booked it after the guy. About 300 feet away from the bush, Spanky caught up with him and made some sickening contact with this guy's ankle and forearms. I have heard a lot of screams on TV and in movies, but I have never heard a blood-curdling scream like this before. My mom pulled me close and pulled out her phone, fingers shaking. While she's on the phone with 911, you can hear this guy screaming, "Get him the heck off me," and me going, "Spanky, he's not a kitty." Spanky may have mangled a stray cat who wandered into the yard before. When police arrived, they asked for a full version of events, and my mom and I gave the details best we could. Mainly her, because 6-year-olds aren't great at descriptions. Spanky was sitting contently at our feet after the officers and my mom removed Spanky from him. The guy was taken away in cuffs. After a quick checkup by an ambulance, he was fine. Just a few good bites. Spanky held more than attacked. About maybe 10 years later, I asked my mother about it when I was looking through old photo albums, and I saw a picture of me and Spanky playing in the backyard. She sighed and said, "Oh, you know what happened. We don't need to talk about it." I said, "Well, yeah, but why would he attack some random homeless guy?" My mom made a really confused face, and I said, "What? That's what happened, right?" "I guess I can tell you now. I didn't want to tell you back then because I didn't want to worry you. The man who Spanky pulled out of the bush had been spotted peeking into houses in the neighborhood that had kids. He was the same man that was hiding in the backyard when you had a sleepover at your friend's house. He had a knife that he dropped when he ran from the bush. Police thought he might have been canvassing the neighborhood before he decided who to take, yet if it wasn't for Spanky, it might have been you. It's a different story connected to this, so I might post it if anyone wants to see it. But yeah, basically this guy was a creep that had been spending weeks at night creeping in people's backyards that he knew had children, and most likely much worse. I live 300 miles from there now and still could not handle coming to that stupid hedge now if I tried. When I was 15, Ray William Johnson was the most subscribed to channel on YouTube. I feel it's necessary to say now that he was not the YouTuber this story is about, but I feel this is important to include for context. Doing some research for this post, he was the first YouTube channel to ever reach 5 million subscribers, so he was very popular at this time. In his show, he reviewed viral videos, and as a teenager, it was one of my favorite things to watch. Every week, he picked one subscriber video to provide the comment question of the week, to which his subscribers would provide responses in the comment section. A friend and I thought we had a great question, featuring her new baby iguana, to ask and sent it in every week after filming it. By the 4th or 5th week, our video was selected and aired on that week's show. In hindsight, there definitely wasn't that much traffic coming into my account, but at the time it really felt like it. I had 30 some messages in my message box at a time and quite a few comments on the original video. I can confidently say, let's not meet to anyone in that comment section, garnering such classy comments, and as these are exact quotes copy and pasted, I'd tap the both of you at the same time. I would do both and the iguana could watch. Or I'd totally do the girl on the left. And of course, the classic, I love you, girl on left. Gross. My friend at the time was 13 years old and my message box did not look much different. Now, as a teenager with low self-esteem, I was so pleased with a lot of this new attention. I was actually taking the time to respond to a lot of my messages, ignoring the disgusting ones, thanking people for congratulating me on getting picked, and occasionally starting up a conversation with some internet strangers. One of the most common questions I got asked after this video was, how old are you? And of course I offered up that information because why wouldn't I? One specific person sticks out because he continued talking to me, consistently. Every day I would have messages from him and I would respond. He was just chatting, just being nice, I thought. He had a YouTube account, small but with a couple thousand subscribers. Having had 11 myself, all of whom are my friends, I thought it was so cool that this channel was successful. He asked me how old I was. I told him 15. He told me he was 21. It was initially quite a tame conversation, but after a few weeks he asked me for my phone number. I'm naive. I gave it to him because he was nice and he didn't live anywhere near me. From what he told me, he lived several states away. Then he texted me all the time. He tried calling me. Around here is where I started getting creeped out. He began talking about wanting to meet me. Now at this point, I'd seen To Catch a Predator in school and I started getting somewhat suspicious. I never gave him more information than the state I lived in and my first name. That seemed innocent enough. But he started getting flirty and creepy and generally uncomfortable to talk to. I slowly stopped responding, ignored the phone calls, and said I was busy. Then he found my social media accounts and tried talking to me there. I told him I had gotten a boyfriend. A lie, but he still sent some generally discomforting messages, especially looking back. This guy made me so uncomfortable that even thinking about it now or seeing his username makes me feel nauseated and tense. The message that really got me, the one that finally scared me enough, and the one that I actually can remember after all of these years, said, I'm going to come to Ohio and find you, and when I finally do, I'm going to hug you so hard. I'm going to squeeze and squeeze until your eyes pop out of your little head. I never told my parents, but I was lucky enough to be able to get my phone number changed. I started getting paranoid that he would find me, checking the locks and closing the curtains. I removed him from some social media and changed my usernames and displayed names to make myself harder to find because, you know, I was a teenager and my priorities were to be in contact with my actual friends all the time. Surprisingly, it got quiet for a while, and slowly I gained some feelings of safety back. I actually even started a new YouTube channel at the recommendation of some friends and started putting myself out there again, doing more media production, which I love, and garnering a small following of around 1,200 strangers, none of whom have ever made me feel unsafe, thankfully. A few years down the road, I was starting the freshman year of college. I had just turned 18 and wouldn't you know, he found me again, followed me on all social media, sent me messages again, and posted some comments on my old YouTube channel, all at once. I felt sick. I remembered all the creepy messages and unsettling feelings and just generally breathlessness I had when he started telling me he would find me and he was coming for me. I had a brief panic attack before swiftly blocking him on everything. My profile pictures were me at my new college, wearing the gear and everything. It would have been significantly easier to find now, and I knew that. I hardly made any friends that first year of college. I didn't leave my room much after that happened. I never went to parties. I scarcely made any friends. Every so often, I remember the experience and get sick. This is one of those times. I have since graduated. I moved far away with my boyfriend. I still check my locks and curtains aggressively every night, sometimes 3 and 4 times, even if I'm sure I've done it. What I'll never understand is how a grown man at 21 would be so interested in a 15-year-old girl, and especially still be interested after several years. Maybe he waited until I was legal. I don't know. The entire memory disgusts me. He still posts to that YouTube channel, and all I can think about is how he tried to get with me when I was a minor. He was a predator. He took away my sense of safety, and up to this point, he's certainly on my top 10 list of people who I hope I never ever have an encounter with again. I've held off on sharing this story for a few years now because of how bad it frightened me. However, reading other people's experiences on Reddit has given me the confidence to share my story and not fear judgment as much. A few years ago, my partner and I decided to take a trip to California to see some of the state parks, ghost towns, and off-the-beaten-path things that didn't get a lot of tourist traffic. For the first leg of the trip, everything went great. We camped in our car and found some really great picturesque landscapes, creepy ghost towns, scenic views, and forgotten highways. I absolutely loved it. After about a week and a half on the road, we decided it was time to start heading back to Oregon, our home base, but we decided to take the scenic route, or some of it, instead of just driving straight home on the 5. Our meandering path took us to the Death Valley area, where there was a short hike to a beautiful waterfall that we had seen online and wanted to do before heading back. In lieu of my experiences, I've chosen not to share the name for everyone's safety. We found the trailhead without issue and began the mile hike to the waterfall. Death Valley is pretty desolate, and I'm not going to lie, it's a creepy place that spooked me bad more than one occasion. But something about this trail was different, sinister even. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I couldn't hear anybody around us. I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. There were no cars at the trailhead when we got there, so I figured we were alone, but I didn't feel that way. The feeling persisted until we reached the end of the mile hike and saw the waterfall. We sat for a moment, took a few pictures, and started hiking back towards the car. I still felt like something was wrong. I felt eyes on me and had a feeling of dread for seemingly no reason at all. I tried to shake it off, but I just couldn't. I started walking a little quicker to our car. We got there without incident and started throwing our hiking poles and water bottles into the back seat of the car. I noticed there was a black SUV with limo-tinted windows, parked next to us in the trailhead parking lot. It wasn't running. I didn't see anyone around it, and it didn't seem like anybody was in it. But where was the driver? The only place the driver could have been was on the same trail as my partner and I, but I hadn't seen or heard the driver on the trail. It was an out and back trail with steep rocky cliffs on either side of it, so the chances of me seeing the driver were actually pretty high, and the chances of him getting off the trail were pretty slim, as the undergrowth was extremely heavy until you got to the cliffside. I am also certain I would have heard somebody crashing through the undergrowth near the trail. As I was thinking about this and getting more and more anxious, I saw a huge man emerge silently from the bushes next to the trail to the waterfall. When I say silently, I mean it. He made no noise at all. He was easily 6'4" to 6'6", strong looking, covered in what my partner believes are criminal tattoos. He had a baseball hat pulled down low over his sunglasses, a long full beard, some kind of a rifle slung across his back, and a large hunting knife on his belt. Had he been out there at the falls with us that whole time? If so, why hadn't I heard or seen him? He was holding what appeared to be a cell phone in his hands and waving down my partner. My partner is 5'5" and skinny. In a silent panic, I grabbed him by the arm to keep him from getting too close to the man. I realize now that this huge man had a gun and distance to him was irrelevant. But as I said, I was in panic mode. The man said that he found this cell phone, the one in his hands near the waterfall, and didn't want us to leave without it. We both quickly checked our pockets and realized that we both had our cell phones, and we both assumed at the same time that this was some sort of setup for a robbery or something far more sinister. We jumped into the car, fired her up, and drove up the dirt road as quick as we could. The man just stared at us through the rear window as we drove off. It terrifies me to think that he was out there with us the whole time, that we were hiking and we didn't hear him, see him, or really even know he was there. How many other times has something like this happened to me? I never would have known the man was out there with us had he not chosen to make his presence known. I'm not going to lie, it really made me think twice about hiking alone in the woods or in isolated and desolate areas. I also find myself wondering what would have happened had we chosen to engage with him. Were there others with him? What would have happened to us? I'm not going to lie, I've had nightmares about this man in several instances since this happened. I'm just glad I trusted my gut. I had this boyfriend who would get mean during sex and choke me harder sometimes out of nowhere and give me this weird look. And he'd explain it to me as having multiple personalities, and one of them was a woman in his head who he was dating who was jealous of me and wanted to kill me. And she came out during sex and he was always arguing with her. He also had a personality who would beg to finger me on my period so he could eat it off his hands. I remember after small arguments he'd sit on the corner holding his legs, shaking back and forth. Catatonic. For literally hours, but he wasn't really catatonic because if somebody else were to step in the room, he'd suddenly snap out of it. He was as normal and charming as could be in public and around friends. This stuff only happened if we were home alone. He'd even write me letters in different handwriting and they'd either be nice or mean, wanting to get rid of me. I don't know how I was just okay with it. He's married now and happy, and I've never heard of anyone else seeing him do this stuff. I'm 22, but I frequently get mistaken for being 15 or 16. This is important to the story. I won't bother making up a name either. His name was Nick, and he came to work with us maybe a week ago. From the moment I laid eyes on him, I knew I hated him and didn't want him to be anywhere near me. Unfortunately, that's exactly where he wanted me to be all of the time. Now, he didn't initially give me a reason to hate him, and I even felt bad about hating him in the beginning. Nick was very nice to everybody and polite. He had a cheerful attitude every day at work, greeted people and asked how they were doing, tried to make jokes, and sent texts in our work chat about how excited he was to work with all of us. Personally, I felt that he was too cheery for work, and that was one of the things I found unsettling for some reason. He always wanted to talk to me for some reason, and I was polite and nothing more towards him. I would give him very short answers to all of his questions, and that conversation would end there. I genuinely wanted nothing to do with him, and yet he didn't seem to get the hint. Every time I was on break, he appeared to be either also on break or about to clock in. He'd come over to my table and sit with me, which I always hated. In my mind, I'd be telling him to get far away from me, but I never did. I didn't have a reason to, so I just looked like an asshole if I did. I never made eye contact with Nick either. It also always felt uncomfortable. It's hard to explain, but there was just something about looking into his eyes that felt off. He was too nice, if that makes sense. He always wanted to talk to me, and he was always standing near my station in the kitchen, always trying to sit with me, and I would have conversations with my friends. Nick would just insert himself where he didn't belong, making it even worse. If I waved to a friend, Nick would also try to wave to me. If I high-fived a friend, Nick would also want a high-five, and begrudgingly, I would give him one because I didn't know how to get out of it. Nick always followed the rules to a T as well. However, this was less about being good at his job and more about not getting in trouble. In his words, "I'm on probation, so I can't lose my job." That sentence felt unsettling coming from him too. Now, a lot of my coworkers have been to jail for a multitude of reasons, and I love all of them, but from Nick, it made my stomach turn. Now this brings us to 2 days ago. I was on break and I saw my 18-year-old coworker, who I will call Emma because I actually value her privacy, sitting with Nick. I'm sure she had sat down first because she sits in the same spot, and Nick had probably sat down with her without asking, as that was a habit of his. I sat at a different table and Emma was quick to grab my attention, asking if I watched Doctor Who. I love Doctor Who, so I stood at her table and talked with her about it for a good 10 minutes, ignoring Nick the entire time. I didn't look at him and I disregarded everything he said in an attempt to join the conversation. Again, I hated this guy. Normally, it takes a lot to make me hate somebody, but all he had to do was walk into the building, and maybe I didn't notice it in the moment, but looking back, I think she wanted to talk to me because Nick was making her uncomfortable. When I clocked back in from my break, it took me a couple hours, but I eventually noticed that Nick had never clocked in for his shift. I turned to one of my friends and asked, "Wasn't Nick scheduled for the grill today? Where is he?" "Oh, he got fired. He was creeping on one of the 16-year-olds in the ice cream section." I immediately felt so vindicated. I was right about him the entire time. Something inside me knew he was a creep. I also got the added context from a manager who technically wasn't supposed to tell me that Nick had 6 accounts of creeping on minors on his record. How he got hired at a place that has minors as a third of their staff instead of being in prison, I have no idea. Every bone in my body knew to hate this scumbag from the very beginning. I no longer feel bad about how cold I was to him, or about ignoring him all the time when he tried to talk to me. Now because I look so young, I can't help but wonder if that's why Nick was so interested in talking to me all the damn time. He went after a 16-year-old who works with us, and I constantly have people assuming I'm close to that age, so the assumption usually ranging from 15 to 17. Honestly, that makes me sick. I really wish I could have been there when he made that poor girl uncomfortable, and I wish I could have done or said something. But at least he got fired, and I can only hope that he goes to jail soon. January 1994. Northridge earthquake. I was sleeping on the floor in my deceased grandmother's room, right in front of the TV. I remember hoping that huge TV wouldn't fall on me. I was 11 and I went back to sleep. Later that day, my family and my stepfamily were all going to Knott's Berry Farm. We were there for about an hour, before I projectile vomited in a trash can. My mom didn't want to keep me there because that would ruin their fun. Instead, she brought me all the way home and left me in the care of a friend of hers, a preschool teacher named Miss B. My mom went into the back of the house where Miss B was, talked for a few minutes, and came back out. She said to take a nap and that she would pick me up later. I don't know how long it was until I woke up to somebody rubbing my feet. I was immediately alert and found that my feet were in a man's lap. It was Miss B's husband, Mr. R. Kids have instincts too. Animals and moms are the same thing. You just know something isn't right, and I knew, and I still wish I had the insight to know what I should have. Mr. R plagued me when we visited. I couldn't put my finger on it in the beginning. Then as I got older, I knew he hugged me too long, pulled me too tight, and gripped my butt like a lover. Occasionally, he would ask me to watch TV with him, and he would put his arm around me. He'd rub his hand up and down my arm like a nice gesture. I didn't realize until later he was caressing the sides of my breasts. One day when I was 12, there was another Girl Scout dance. My mother insisted Mr. R would go with me, and I said I'd rather stay home. She called me inconsiderate and ungrateful, saying that he was taking his time to do it. I went. She had bought me a black dress, and it had colorful flowers on it. We did the show dance thing, and I kept excusing myself to the bathroom. Eventually, the night ended, and I told my mom I'd help her clean up and I'd go home with her. She said no, that she would be there until late and didn't want to hear my complaining. She said Mr. R would be the only too happy to take me home. I remember the terror of my 12-year-old self being driven home that night, his hand creeping even higher and inward on my naked thigh under my dress. My mom told me to never be rude to him, so when we got to my house, I pecked him on the cheek, thanked him, and ran inside. Throughout this time, I started gaining more weight, subconsciously trying to repel him. All the weight ended up in my chest. The visits continued. My mom would tell me to go outside and visit with Mr. R. He and his wife favored my little sister, so every visit was so they could give her something. The straw that broke me was when I was 14. We were living in a different house. It was a Saturday. My mom was visiting friends, my little sister in tow. My older sister was sleeping, as she still does to this day. Mr. R was at her house, fixing my mom's car. She had been picked up by Miss B. I thought I was clever that if I locked myself in, he would just leave. So when he was finished, he came in, knocked on my door, and said he was leaving. I said okay from the haven of my room, and then he said, "Well, aren't you going to open the door and say goodbye?" He said it the way adults do when children are being selfish and spoiled. And I knew he would tell my mom, and I fear my mom more than anything. So I opened the door and he smiled triumphantly at me, like he knew I'd never get to say no. So I went up to hug him and pecked him on the mouth because he never turned a cheek peck anymore. And then he did turn, and because he wouldn't let go, I pecked him on the cheek. And then he turned his head for the last time and kissed me, full on the mouth, tongue sliding over mine like a serpent. I pushed him away and he left, but still smiling. I never hugged him again. I only said hello from a distance. My mom invited him and Miss B to my high school graduation, and he ruined more than a few pictures. Then when I was 21, my mom decided to throw my precious younger sister a sweet 16 party, which my older sister and I had to decorate, cook, and clean for. Miss B and Mr. R were there, and I let myself be surly and rude because I didn't care anymore. A week later, my mom is mad at me about something, and then all hell breaks loose as my mom screams at me that I'm trying to ruin my sister's birthday party. And I told her what happened, screaming and crying. I told her about Mr. R and the years of attention he spent on me. And I will never, not ever, forgive or forget my mom, the woman I trusted, as she said. Well, I should have known. He molested one of his own daughters too. I thought you knew that. Sometime later, my mom blamed me for it going on so long, saying that I should have been smart enough to say something. To this day, I think my mom knew it was happening but refused to help me because she was getting help from Mr. R for mechanical stuff and because it deflected attention away from my younger sister. I don't know which of them I hate more. And the only person I let touch my feet now is my fiance. And that was only after months of him kicking out of reflex when he touched me. Sorry for the wall of text. Hi, so I'm 21. Not sure if gender matters, but I am female. Now this might sound a bit tad over dramatic since it's been years since this incident has happened that caused this fear, but I just want to get it off my chest as somebody who really doesn't talk about it. I personally find this encounter super creepy, especially getting older and being able to look back on it. I've also learned a lot from it, so maybe posting what happened could either guide others to stay alert that it could happen to them or know the signs. I live in rural Ohio, so there's not much that goes on here. We don't live in the best area either, with lots of druggies or pedos. Basically, if you have kids, you really shouldn't live around here. When I was younger, we didn't really worry much about anything happening to us or questionable things due to the fact that our family is known in this area. My grandpa was a known cop for many years and was extremely respected, and people knew he would fight over us. So nobody really messed with us. We also lived around multiple other children our age. It wasn't uncommon to let your kids run around by themselves before nighttime because our neighborhood essentially relied on each other and the other kids to keep each other safe. And it worked for the most part. We knew what people to stay away from, and they knew to stay away from us as well. When I was in middle school, the bus ran at 7 a.m., and we would have to be at the end of our long driveway by 7 a.m. to catch the bus on time. And this happened during winter, and our bus tended to be late sometimes and would reach us around 7:05 to 7:15 at the latest. But we made sure to be out there at 7 a.m. in case they were on time. It was me and my two cousins. One was 4 years younger than me and the other was a year older, but we were in the same grade. The road is straight where our driveway is, so cars come by multiple times and you would be able to see if a car was slowing down and such, and they'd see us as well. We were always told not to stand by the end of the driveway and always keep a distance, so if a drunk driver or whatever happened to swerve, we would be okay for the most part. We were at the age where I and my cousin, who was in the same grade as me, essentially babysat the younger cousin, and we didn't have an adult accompany us at the end of the driveway anymore. It was super cold that day, and the sun was just coming up, and we were annoyed because the bus driver was late while waiting in the cold. I noticed a car was coming, and again, this happened all the time, so it wasn't like I was checking it out or anything. I just noticed it and went back to listening to music on my phone. I hear a loud brake sound, so I look up, and the cars in front of our driveway now fully stopped. The man in the car was waving his hand towards us to signal us to come closer to him, and, of course, I refused and was frozen in my spot because this had never happened before. He could tell we were obviously shaken by this and said he worked for a school bus but was lost and he just got hired. He named a school that was an hour away. Remind you, it's past 7 a.m. at this point, and I immediately knew he was lying. It didn't make sense to me why he would be lost at a job he said he already got. Plus, it being this late, I'd think he would already be at school. No way would he be lost to the point he's an hour away from the district and signaling children to his car the way he did if he were a teacher at all. It also made no sense to me logically how he would be lost from a job he obviously had to go in to get hired for. This was before Zoom and all of those things, I'm pretty sure. I immediately said I'm going to get an adult, and he clearly panicked and said it wasn't necessary. He just wanted us to get closer and show him where to go. I pointed straight. I truly don't know the direction to the district, but that was not my main focus, honestly. I told him go straight and he ignored me. My little cousin was moving towards his car, and I grabbed him by his hair and kept him by me. I refused to let go of his head. I'm shaking and I'm trying to not show I'm scared because I don't know what's about to happen. The driveway is a long one as well. Like, I truly didn't feel safe turning my back to him. I have my other hand on my phone and I'm shaking. So I'm struggling with gloves on, but I'm able to call my mom, and thankfully she answers. She usually would ignore my calls and be on the phone with her boyfriend. The guy gets out of his car when he sees him on the phone with somebody, and I start immediately crying and telling my mom there's a man out here, and I think he's going to hurt us. She comes out running, and the second she gets closer and he sees her, he bolts back to his car and dashes away. A car that was around the corner of the road also dashed away as well. Now looking back, it's even more scary, since if it was just somebody who needed to get past said car that was in the middle of the road by our driveway, they would have just either honked or gone in the other lane to pass them. They definitely also saw the entire thing and didn't get out of their car to help us or anything like that. So it makes me think they were also in on this entire situation. I'm forced to go to school that day, and my mom calls the cops. And when I get home, I find out even more horrible news that just made me realize my gut feeling was correct. My mom told them about the car and how it looked and such, and how they found an abandoned car that matched her description just up the road. So, they found who it belonged to and eventually found out he wasn't a school teacher. He worked on the barges. The cops said they thought it dealt with sex trafficking from the looks of it, and they didn't even catch him since he already left on the boat or whatever. Who knows what would have happened if he got one of us. I'm assuming he would have been on that boat and horrible things would have happened. It still pisses me off that he was never caught and possibly other kids were victims of this. It's truly terrifying, yet to this day I refuse to go near the road. I still have recurring nightmares of it. I'm always on alert now too, which I most definitely should have been more alert about back then, but I was just a kid and clearly didn't realize how it would have affected me in real time. Before I tell my story, I just want to say I'm aware of how dumb it is to do stuff like this, and I probably won't be doing this for a long time after what happened a few months ago. Anyways, I just really needed to post this because I don't know who else to tell. About a half a year ago, I had the scariest experience of my life. For context, I'm a dumb teenage boy who sneaks out every now and then just to walk around at night. I find something very peaceful about walking around after dark, but my parents never let me stay out past sunset. So, for about a year, whenever school gets hard or just life in general gets stressful, I sneak out and just walk around for about 2 hours sometimes. Anyways, the night I'm talking about began with me deciding to go for another 2 a.m. ritual. I grabbed a sweatshirt, got on my shoes once I was outside, and hopped the fence to freedom. After I was safely away from my neighborhood, I took one of my usual routes, which is cutting through another neighborhood and walking onto a winding road, where I then walk down the middle of it and head towards a circle of shops and fast food restaurants. I was probably there for a solid chunk of time, just walking in the loop and ending up sitting on a bench. At some point, I picked up a plastic spoon on the ground and started to grind it against the pavement until the spoon part was half gone out of boredom. This is important later. I was chilling there for a bit before I decided to walk around a bit more, and I eventually ended up at a park, like 10 minutes away from my neighborhood where I usually end off the night, just staring off into the sky. The park itself creeps me out sometimes because at night there's a huge ring of trees surrounding all sides of you, and anyone could watch from the woods. Anyways, stuff starts to get real here because I'm staring up into existence, feeling like a philosopher while I'm lying on one of those table benches when I hear an old man whistle. I probably shot up because I had never had another human interaction on these walks, and I saw this old man dimly illuminated by a streetlight by the only entrance of the park. I had seen him before. He is this tall, skinny white dude that walks around our town all day, and I would honestly think he was homeless if he wasn't wearing the same fancy button-up and cargo pants every day. My mom and I have talked about him, and we think he's mentally disabled and probably lives with a caretaker. I had an interaction with him once. About a year ago, I was walking home in broad daylight when I passed the man who was at the time sitting on a bench. Dude just looks at me and says, "Jesus loves you," with a weird little smirk on his face. I responded with an awkward, "I know," even though I'm actually an atheist and didn't really think much of it. Anyways, back to the park at night, I just stare at him in that empty parking lot probably way longer than I should have, because he was already creeping me the heck out. I imagine we were staring at each other for a real long time before he slowly started walking towards me. At this point I'm frozen in fear because why the heck is this old geezer out with me at like 3 a.m. in an empty park? I'm standing up at this point when he gets too close to me and just gives me this cheeky grin like he knows something I don't yet, and I'm still just gawking at him like a freaking buffoon. Have you ever scoffed at a book or a movie when the main character is frozen in fear? Well, I have, and I never will again because at this point I'm more frozen than I've ever been in my life. At some point, after probably 10 seconds of awkward standing, he just kind of pats and half grabs my shoulder and reaches into his pocket to pull out a plastic spoon. That same plastic spoon that I was holding about an hour ago at the shop plaza. He just kind of tucks it in my front sweatshirt pocket, and I guess something just makes my mind snap out of my frozen stance, because I absolutely book it to the public bathroom and lock the door. I'm now in this dimly lit bathroom in the middle of the night, and I'm guessing at this time it was past 3 in the morning. I assumed that maybe he would leave once he saw me in my state of panic, but honestly I don't think he ever left. I ended up looking closer at the plastic spoon, and it was altered. Have you ever seen that one viral AI generated image where it looks completely normal at a glance, but you can't identify a single thing? If not, just search up, name one thing in this image. Now imagine that except for a word carved onto a plastic spoon, but you can't read it or even identify any of the letters. I think I sat in that locked bathroom for over half an hour, just contemplating every single decision I've made in the past year that led up to this nightmare I was in at that moment. To be clear, I had no phone or a way of contacting someone because my parents installed Life 360 on my phone, and they can see my location whenever. I also had no watch or access to the outside to tell the time. I ended up gaining the courage to unlock the door and just absolutely rocket towards the exit of the park. Before I turned the corner, I looked back for a second and saw a figure sitting on the bench that was right next to the bathroom. This senile old man had waited outside for an hour just to see me one more time. I'm being completely honest when I say I held the full sprint until I got to my neighborhood, where I finally caught my breath behind a bush and then snuck back in my house. I haven't gone out at night since that experience, and I don't know if I ever will sneak out again. I still have the spoon buried somewhere in my wardrobe, but I haven't looked at it in months. Sometimes I think about how long he was following me and if it was an isolated incident or if he had been stalking me on other late night trips. I would love to hear your guys' opinion on the matter, unless you're here to lecture me about my actions, because trust me, I've already learned. Let me begin by saying that I'm a stripper, so of course I meet creepy people. I've had plenty of creepy guys come in who way overstep their boundaries. However, this guy didn't overstep with touch. It was with what he said that started to get to me. Also, please forgive me for my awful writing abilities. I was at work last night when this older guy came into my work. He was probably around 5'8", thin and a little bit scruffy. There weren't any other customers in the club because it was early in the night. I was on stage practicing some pole work when I noticed that he was talking to one girl and they went to the back. I assumed that he bought a dance and I was waiting for her to drop him so I could slide in and hopefully get a dance from him too. I was walking over there when he decided to get up and approach me instead. He came up to me and the first thing he said was, "Damn girl, are you like a size 0? Are you even old enough to work here? And I love how petite you are." Me being the seductive person that I am, I informed him that yes, I am a size 0 and that I just turned 18. We sat and introduced ourselves. He's a truck driver and has 2 adult daughters. He constantly repeated himself, saying that I'm beautiful and so young and that my toes are so petite. I giggled and threw a compliment back at him. He asked me for my body measurements and started telling me that he could tell I had a naughty side to me. Then he asked if I had been popular with the boys when I was younger. I told him that I'm a virgin. That's when things got bad. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "You don't know how far a man would go to deflower a teenage girl like you." Of course I laughed it off and pretended to be flattered. He paid me $20 for sitting with him for so long. He then said that he'd love to be my sugar daddy and take me lingerie shopping. Said that he'd kill to have a girlfriend like me walking around the house, completely naked in heels teasing him. I would have gotten up and walked away, but I thought I could squeeze some money from him by getting him in the VIP room since he said he was so infatuated with me and wanted to see my you-know-what in a very descriptive way. Anyways, as we got further into the conversation, he put more and more emphasis on how much he'd love to take a young girl's virginity. That's when he started pushing too much. He insisted on paying me thousands of dollars to do it. Kept pushing and pushing that I go back to his place right away. He started getting too touchy, and the bouncers were on the other side of the club. I was scared to try and get up because I didn't want to make him mad. Luckily, some girls noticed how long we'd been sitting there and came over to rescue me. I left immediately because I just didn't want to be there after that. I only made $20 and walked away with zero because I had to pay the house fee. You have to be tough to work in this industry. While it definitely didn't ruin the job for me, it did ruin my night. He said he was a regular, so now I'm concerned about how many other girls he's conned into prostitution. Portland is sex trafficking central, and I have no doubt that a truck driver like him would be involved in the industry. This was around 2009, so I was about 11 or 12. I live in Rhode Island, which is pretty small, and live very sheltered. I got my first laptop around this time. Every day after school, my group of friends and I would log into AIM and talk about school, boys, and, usual middle school things. I don't know if any of you remember, but there were AIM public groups where you could meet strangers. That's where my story begins, unfortunately. A group of my friends and I went into a public AIM group just being stupid, making jokes, sharing YouTube videos. One guy takes a certain interest in me and he adds me so we can talk privately. I don't remember what we talked about, really. School, anime, and about my friends. Looking back, I think he was grooming me, but nothing seemed off about it then. He was a 32-year-old man. I can't remember his name for the life of me. He lived in a neighboring state of Connecticut, which isn't too far. I had hoped to meet him since he was really nice to me. I was young and was being bullied in school, so anybody online seemed like an escape. He and I talked about Vocaloid, a program where you can make it sing to any song or create your own, almost like autotune but not your voice. It wasn't as popular back then, but I was so excited to have a friend who liked what I did. Things went by normally for a while. I used to do YouTube videos, like anime music videos, and he had me subscribe to my old account. I even showed him a song called Luke at Night Fever. He put it into his favorites. I was happy. But one day, he began being different. He asked to call me on the phone. I was one of the only kids in my class who didn't have a cell phone, and I didn't want my family to catch me on the house phone with a stranger, so I politely said I can't, sorry. And to this day, I remember his answer. Call me or I'll assault and murder you. I was sheltered, like I said. I panicked. My throat clenched up and I threw up. I blocked him immediately. I should have called the cops. Should have told my mom, but I didn't. I was so afraid that I had done something wrong that they wouldn't take me seriously. That I would have my computer taken away. He knew I was 11 or 12. As soon as he realized what I had done, he sent AIM spam bots at me. It was to the point where it crashed my computer. They all had obscene sexual names. I made a new account on AIM and pretty much forgot about him. I log on to YouTube one day and I see I have a new message. Expecting it to be my friend from Sweden, a young girl around my age, I get excited and quickly open it. My heart sinks. It's him. I still remember his YouTube. He's still active on it today. He says something along the lines of, following, "Hey, my cousin got that Vocaloid program. Unblock me and I can send you a copy." I knew that I couldn't ever forgive what he said. I was scared of him. I didn't block him on YouTube though. I'm not sure why. I don't know if I even knew how back then. The messages keep coming, but I never answer them. They're all, "I miss you so much, I'm sorry." At one point I think he says he loves me. I eventually lose interest in my YouTube account since it was under my real initials and last name. I made one under a fake name to protect myself. I had a lot more subs on my old account, so I decided to log in and upload a video saying I was back. That was 3 or 4 years ago. The minute I do, I get a message from him saying, "I missed you, you're so beautiful." I check his YouTube channel. There's that damn song, Luke and Night Fever, featured on his page. I delete the messages, and I delete every video. Every time I get a message request on Facebook, YouTube, or anything, I get anxious and worried it's him. To this day, I've never gone to Connecticut no matter how much I want to. I'm always afraid he will recognize my face and approach me. This is a quick story about a stalking experience that had just happened yesterday. There hasn't been a resolution yet, and although I was not the primary target, a group of my friends, including myself, were still involved. It was certainly terrifying and a huge slap in the face from reality to always make sure you are aware of your social media following and privacy. We have an iMessage group chat going of about 7 friends and me. One of the friends, Kay, is kind of the annoying little sister type and gets on all of our nerves, but we tolerate her. Kay sends us a screenshot of a conversation with her younger cousin, who is either a senior in high school or a freshman in college. He tells her that he is on Tumblr and that a photo of Kay showed up on his feed. He proceeded to reblock. Like what? I don't use Tumblr, so I'm not sure how it works, and show her. Kay is confused, because the photo was a random selfie from her Instagram, which she rarely uses and is set to private. In addition, neither she nor any of the people in the group chat even use Tumblr. She asked her cousin for a link to the site. Upon skimming the website, we find to our horror that the Tumblr is brimming with photographs of all 5 girls in the group chat. Individual posts with personalized captions of photos taken from our respective Instagrams, most of which are private. The further back we viewed the page, the creepier it got, because it seemed like the page was targeting one particular girl in the group. Q. 90% of the photos the individual posted were just of Q, mostly taken from her Instagram. There were love poems dedicated to her, sentimental captions accompanying some photos, such as Q and her loving parents, and even some photos that were obtained from her Facebook account, despite all settings being private. The owner of the Tumblr seems to be an adult male from a country different to where we live, who occasionally posted things that were more personal to him, such as a photo of an ice skating rink in his childhood neighboring or a YouTube link to a homemade footage from like 8 years ago that he helped produce. The owner of the account doesn't seem to be the same person as the owner of the Tumblr. Through my own investigation, the person does seem to be real, though the primary purpose of that site looked like a shrine of sorts dedicated to Q. There were in fact other posts, such as lyrics to random old songs by obscure artists, which hinted at the owner's age. There were photos pulled from my own Instagram, such as a zoomed in and cropped picture of my face taken from a group shot. The most horrifying part was one of the older photos he had posted. This photo was not just one of Q's pulled from her social media. It was a photo of 2 real framed photos in the home of person Q. The caption for that photo indicated that the stalker had been dedicated to her since 2012. We just came across this Tumblr in 2017. Needless to say, we were all thoroughly stunned and frightened. We have no idea what to do. Q proceeded to send an angry message to the owner via some link on their page, and just like that, the page was deleted. We have no more leads, although I've been doing my own research on trying to figure out the identity of the person. I'm not even sure what we can do from here, seeing how we no longer have evidence except for screenshots of the site that we took, as well as a Wayback Machine archive link of the site. Any advice would be appreciated. Quick update. Hey guys, I just wanted to clarify a few things. Still don't know the real identity of this person and probably won't update again unless I do. The framed photos I mentioned were not taken directly from Q's house. They were taken from her social media, printed separately and framed. 2 separate photos lying side by side on a bedsheet or something were displayed on Tumblr. That is what really got to us. The whole time we were scrolling, it was definitely creepy and weird, but didn't seem like a huge threat until we saw that. After we were given the link to the site, we were checking it out and screenshotting, but we didn't get to view the entire thing. Q had sent the owner of the Tumblr an angry message as soon as we found the site, and it was promptly taken down. So, there was a lot of other material on there that we didn't see before the site was deleted. I don't want to think about if there was anything worse than the framed photos. I took a lot of screenshots as I went before the site got deleted, based on the very minimal information I had of the person. Their first name, occupation, for some reason it was listed, city, and minor details that they had posted in non-Q photos. I narrowed it down to a suspect. This is purely based on the limited details I had seen and researched the shit out of, but it was the only person that matched. However, the suspect I'm pinning it on makes absolutely no sense in regard to the fact that he is no one we know, has no relation to us, and is from a different country. He's basically a middle-aged white dude in X country, and if it's him, he stumbled upon Q and our friend group by chance. I always figured that in a stalking scenario, the person is always somehow connected to you, like an ex, old friend, or enemy, person you see on your commute. But this guy has us befuddled. Obviously, I could be wrong, but he matches my clues and I am relatively decent at internet sleuthing, which is why I pinpointed him. Anyways, I really appreciate everyone's advice and insights on how to go about this. Thank you. For a little backstory, the legal drinking age in my country is 18. So if you wanted alcohol and didn't have a fake ID or a parent to get it for you, then you had to wait around outside the off-licensed liquor store for the Americans, until someone came by who agreed to go in and purchase it for you. So we waited around, found somebody who was willing to go in and buy our alcohol for us, and got him to purchase a few bottles of vodka for me and a few friends, 2 of whom I was with and the others we were meeting after we'd done this. Now, as it was around 6 p.m., we decided it was too much of a risk to decant our vodka into less suspicious looking bottles in the middle of the street, as it was very busy, so we did what we would usually do in this situation and found a nearby food place to quickly run in and use the bathroom to decant our alcohol so we could be on our way. This time we chose to do this in a nearby McDonald's. We'd done it in here before, so we knew it was a safe bet. So we go inside and head straight for the bathroom, as we've done a million times before. As we get in there, I and my other 2 friends, we will call them Harriet and Kara, all occupy one cubicle to get the job done and get out and back to our drinking ASAP. And as I previously mentioned, we'd done this lots of times before and usually opted to come into this McDonald's as it was usually busy, which meant nobody paid attention to 3 teenagers running straight into the bathroom without purchasing anything. So anyways, we were all in there doing our thing when I could suddenly hear a lot of shifting and moving around above us. I figured it was probably the air conditioning and opted not to tell my friends, as I thought it would freak them out. We get the job done, and as we were about to leave the cubicle, we hear a giggle and, "Where are you girls off to?" I was presenting as female at the time. I looked up and saw the forehead and eyes of a male who looked to be about 30, just staring out from underneath a tile in the ceiling that he'd slightly lifted. We were all in shock, just staring at this guy who proceeded to giggle down at us and ask our names, where we were going, and if he could come. We were all in shock because, let's be honest, who really expects there to be some random guy in the ceiling of a McDonald's? Being a teenager who thought I was untouchable, I proceeded to tell the guy that he was a perv and to screw off. The guy seemed to enjoy this and giggled a little bit more, still shifting around in the ceiling, never taking his eyes off of us. Now, I should probably mention that along with pouring our drink into other bottles, we pre-rolled a few joints, so we were terrified to alert anyone at this point, as we were young and terrified of our parents finding out. The guy still staring at us proceeds to ask us questions like, "What age are you guys? Where do you live? Can I have some of your drink and smoke a little bit of your weed?" Still, all the while twitching and fidgeting overhead. He then started to lift the tile, and as we were all stuck in a cubicle with this guy above us, we knew the only way for him to get down was to come down directly on top of us. So we noped out at that point pretty quickly. We went outside and discussed what we were going to do, and I decided to go back in and alert someone, as it's a very busy McDonald's, and I knew there would be women and children in and out of the toilet until closing time. I didn't want to risk that creep staying up there just to spy on them, especially since I knew he was there and had witnessed his behavior firsthand. So I go in and tell a member of staff that I'd been in the toilet for a long while, taking a phone call. A terrible lie, but my 15 or 16-year-old brain was too scared to tell the truth, in case they alerted the police. And that's when the guy had appeared, and to my shock, they were completely unsurprised. They were just mad more than anything. I saw a few male members of staff enter the toilet, and I figured they could handle it from there, so I went on my way. We still went into that McDonald's, but never had any encounters with the ceiling guy again. We're not even sure if the guy got caught, as we didn't hear anything about it after. I was watching the Jeffrey Epstein documentary on Netflix last night and I'm spooked. Literally had a mini panic attack with all these memories flooding in. As I'm lying in bed watching, a girl's face flashes across the screen and I recognize one of his victims as one of my really good childhood friends. I don't know if it belongs here, but here's my story. I've lived in South Florida almost all of my life with my crazy controlling parents that wouldn't let me do anything as a kid. No phone calls to friends, no extracurricular activities unless they were academic, Couldn't have friends over, and you can forget about me going over to anyone's house. Plus, my dad worked at my school during my elementary school years, so I had to be on my best behavior. So when I went to my middle school, I was so freaking pumped. Finally, some type of freedom. My personality started to shine, and making friends came easy to me. Fast forward to a year in, and I had become really good friends with these two girls. We can call them Heather and Sharon. They were both pretty popular and friendly, but what fascinated me most was that Heather was the only girl in middle school that I knew that was able to sleep over a boy's house. It was something so foreign to me since my parents told me I couldn't even go on a date with a boy until after I graduated high school or college. They didn't specify, so I automatically thought she was the coolest chick I'd ever met. Throughout our friendship, we were known as the tripod. We had all the same classes and lunch periods, so we all got pretty close. Over time, Heather would always ask me to hang out with her and Sharon either after school or on the weekends, but with my parents, there was no way in heck. I did attempt multiple times to ask for permission with no success each time. Not even a maybe. I was so bummed because I always felt left out after having Heather and Sharon hanging out with me, something I would eventually become grateful for. One day, while sitting out in the courtyard for lunch, Heather pulled me aside and asked what I thought about skipping school for one day. I instantly freaked out and thought about that automated message the school calls home with to let you, or I should say the parents, know that you weren't at school. If my parents ever got that, my ass would be toast, so I shut the idea down right away and kind of laughed it off because there would be no way to pull it off. But she literally would not stop asking, so eventually she convinced me and we were ready to start the planning. It took us about a week every day during lunch, trying to figure out how to pull this off. The thrill of it had me so excited as I've never done anything like this. The plan was to have my mom drop me off at school as usual and have the girls there waiting for me. And we would simply just walk off to the gas station, and that's near the school, and have one of Heather's friends pick us up. Not sure how I planned on dodging the school call, but whatever. Oh, and I forgot to add, Heather made it a point several times to remind me that I need to wear something that would give me an innocent look. I blew this off because I was already 13 years old. I looked innocent enough. The plan goes smoothly and we were walking to the gas station, but as we're walking, Heather's cell phone is blowing up. Like constant phone calls and texts coming through. Each one she answered. Just meet us at the gas station like we usually do. At this point, I'm confused because I thought it was supposed to be the tripod hanging out for the day. As we get closer to the gas station, I see a group of like 7 other girls standing there, and they're around the same age range, 12 to 14. Some girls I've even seen around school, others I didn't recognize, but they all perk up when they see Heather walk up. All of a sudden, Heather yells, "Who's ready to make some money?" And almost all the girls raise their hands and start cheering. I grabbed Sharon and asked her what she was talking about, and the look that Sharon gave me is one I'll never forget. It was like she was saying, "Get out now while you can." It just made me very uncomfortable, and she ended up never saying anything. It was weird. A big group of young girls who should be in school, just hanging out at a gas station. As we're standing there, 2 black Lincoln Town cars pull up and make a sudden stop right in front of us. Heather starts numbering the girls and tells the first group to get in the first car, and as they do, the car speeds away. The other one slowly rolls the window down, and I see this older man with sunglasses on just sitting there smiling. He asked if we're ready to go to the mansion, which excites the 2 other girls standing behind me. He opens the door and they jump in, followed by Sharon. Heather is standing next to me and nudges me to go on, but as she does, I start going off on her, asking her what the heck's going on, where are we going, who is this man, and why didn't she mention this in any of her plans. She's looking almost annoyed at me and says, "Out of all the girls I bring, you are the only one that's giving me a problem. I thought you would want to get out and have some fun, and with your body you can make a killing." At the time I was so naive I didn't know exactly what she meant by the tone of her voice and how pressured she was making me feel. I ended up backing out and ran back to school. As embarrassed as I felt for bailing out my friends, I feared my mom and her belt a lot more. Plus, going off in a car with someone I've never met screams stranger danger. But I'm so grateful that my parents put that fear in me, or else I don't know if I would have made that smart decision. After that, I barely hung out with Heather again, and she tried a few more times, but I just got bad vibes from her and cut her off. But I always saw her randomly walk out of school towards the gas station, always with a group of girls. Sharon, on the other hand, started to spiral into depression slowly. She would only hang out with Heather and would cling to her like a lost puppy. I noticed that she would miss school more frequently until one day she just stopped coming altogether. Years later, I found out that she ended up dying, and recently, after watching the documentary, I'm convinced that she was one of Jeffrey Epstein's victims, and Heather was one of the recruiters. I should have mentioned this happened in 2004 in West Palm Beach. I reached out to the only childhood friend I stay in contact with, and she confirmed that it was in fact my friend whom we went to middle school with in that documentary. Since this morning, I've contacted a friend who's in law enforcement to see if I could speak with someone about what I know. Even the little information I have could help out in some way. As for Sharon, I never met anyone in her family or had any contact information, as I was on major lockdown back then and this was a long time ago. Still trying to track them down to see if they knew about any of this. So, for some much needed context, I'm a nudist. Most of us nudists travel to resorts or campgrounds in our area where nudity is allowed because they are private property. These campgrounds are often near the woods or on the outskirts of their respective towns, as nudism isn't exactly an accepted lifestyle. This encounter took place at a campground last July. I won't mention the place for privacy reason, but just know it sits on 5 acres of rural land surrounded by hundreds of acres of dense forest and hills. I planned on staying at this campground for 3 nights. It was an IPW, so besides those who live on the campgrounds, there weren't many people out and about. But whatever, I liked the seclusion. After checking in and dropping my bag at the cabin, I went over to the pool to swim. After swimming a few laps and enjoying the sunshine, I noticed something. At the top of one of the hills overlooking the campground stood a man looking right at me. Normally, that wouldn't mean much, but he was clothed. I should probably mention now that this campground isn't a standard nudist campground. About 90% of nudist campgrounds are clothing optional, meaning you are allowed to wear clothes if you choose, apart from some exceptions, like in the pool or shower areas. But this campground was nude only, meaning unless in the case of extreme weather or women when menstruating, all clothing was prohibited. And I know this place is a strict enforcer of that, so a clothed person was a bit out of the ordinary. First, I thought the man was possibly a worker, being that they would usually wear something while doing maintenance to protect themselves. But this guy was wearing blue jeans and a black hoodie with the hood up. I felt off, especially being that it was 85 degrees outside. He stood there frozen like a statue with his hands in his hoodie pocket. The campground had nature trails that were accessible to the public, not being that it was so far from town that all the locals knew of the place. Having unsuspected visitors like this was virtually non-existent. Even though I was creeped out by this guy, I knew I needed to tell people in the office about him to shoo him away. So I got up, dried myself off, and made my way to the office. I told the 2 older ladies working at the office about what I saw. Being that they knew me because I came here often, they took my claim seriously. I brought them to where I saw him by the pool. But yep, you guessed it, he was gone. I was gone for about 2 minutes, giving him plenty of time to walk away, and being that it was so early in the morning, I doubt anyone else saw him. We went up to the top of the hill to see if we could spot him, but no luck. I figured that because he saw me go to the office and because I just straight up spotted him, that I probably scared him off. He was a creep, yes, but I rationalized the whole thing by thinking he was probably just some local who ventured too far down the trail, so I went on about my day. As the day went on, people came and went as any normal campground would, and I had almost completely forgotten about the encounter. That was until night fell. This campground offered cabins for rent or guests, and lucky me, I had the cabin closest to the trail. It was very cozy and small, no more than 2 to 3 parking spaces of room, and had paper-thin wood as the walls, allowing me to hear even the faintest of sounds from outside. My cabin was away from pretty much anyone. My nearest neighbor was a local who we will call Sam, who lived in his trailer about 150 feet away from my cabin. I was lying on the bed reading a book when I could hear faint crunching of twigs and grass outside from the cabin, almost like footsteps. At first I thought it was Sam because he would usually smoke around this time, but something about the frequency of the footsteps made them suspicious, as if they were trying to be as discreet as possible. I got up from my bed and slowly peered through the blinds. It took me a while to see, but I could just make out a figure slowly walking towards Sam's trailer. My heart sank. Sam was a pale white man, and I'd never seen him clothed before, so the fact that I couldn't make out his pale skin through the darkness made me come to terms with who it was. It was the man from the hill. Same black hoodie, and after confirming, the same blue jeans. Whoever this was, he must have picked Sam's trailer for whatever sick plan he had, being that his trailer was the closest to the trail. Then everything hit me at once. Sam has 2 young daughters in that trailer. They lived there during the summer. Sam was the only one with kids that actually lived in the campground. This guy somehow knew that and had plans to do who knows what. Who knows how long he's been secretly watching them. I saw them on that hill and he was only 100 feet from the trailer, probably doing one last dry run before his plan. I knew I had to do something. I grabbed my phone and called Sam. Calling the police would have been pointless, seeing how far we were from the closest station. The phone rang and rang and rang and he wasn't picking up. I called again and again, occasionally peeking out the blinds again to see the man walking around the trailer. Around the 5th time, I saw the man stand on a box and peer into a window. I decided that I needed to do something drastic. I was going to go out there and handle this myself. I didn't have time to get my clothes from my bag, so I just threw on my hiking boots and, as soon as I opened the cabin door, I heard a high-pitched scream. I snapped my head in the direction of the trailer and I saw all the lights flick on, revealing the man climbing out of the window from the trailer and starting to run down the trail. Without even thinking, I chased him. I could hear Sam yell, "What happened?" as one of his daughters explains the situation. Sam then takes off as well, seeing me in pursuit. I could just barely make out the man's blue jeans, but he was much faster than Sam and I. The weirdo got away. I stopped to catch my breath with Sam catching up to me, doing the same. Told him what I saw and we made our way back to the trailer to regroup. By then, a few other residents were out of their trailers with his daughters being told what happened. A few of the other men went into the trail to see if they could find anything while I called the police. It took 30 minutes for them to show up and we told them what happened, and soon some officers also went into the woods. We never found out who that man was, and since then, Sam and his daughter sold their trailer and moved out just weeks later. I haven't been back to that campground since, and from what I hear, the residents have moved on from all of this. They put up a fence line throughout the whole property as well as a volunteer security guard who patrols the premises. So, a few years ago, I used to work in this petrol station as part of a supermarket. It was on Christmas Eve, just working I'd say a not so bad late shift. With about an hour and a half left of my shift, this drunk guy enters to buy some food. I served him, and I'll admit, since it was Christmas Eve, I thought I looked the part as I was wearing a full face of makeup, mainly to save me time after my shift as I was going out after. The drunk guy just stared at me in silence after I rang him up, and I'm just staring back at him and I say, "You're all good now. You okay there?" And he says with this speech all slurred, "Wow, you're beautiful. Like, you've got really nice eyes." I just responded with, thanks." Then he says, "Are you single? Are you? Please tell me." "I have a fiance named Mark." Now, I've had a few of these encounters before, and what I've learned is that I tell most of these people I have a boyfriend, either in honesty or just in defense. Sometimes they don't give up and carry on badly flirting, because when I told him I'm not single, he quickly responded, "I bet your boyfriend doesn't even realize how beautiful you are. I can treat you better than him." My colleague, Matthew, suddenly sensed that I was starting to get uncomfortable, but when I looked at him and I said, "Let me handle this," I found my new way of shutting him down, which had worked for me for 9 times out of 10 in situations like these. But this time it didn't, so I said, "Sir, my wife always notices my good looks." Yes, I tell them in other words I'm a lesbian. The guy starts in silent defeat while he is, which I'm guessing is, soothing that burn. I carried on with filling a shelf. I had to bend over to pick up an empty box off the floor, and just as I did that, the guy came up behind me, and I shit you not, he slaps my ass and shouts, "I bet I can convert ya." Hearing that enraged me. Without a thought, I turned around and threw my fist into his face. I basically punched him, but it hit his cheek. And at that moment, my colleague, Matt, hopped over from behind the counter, grabbed the man who I sucker punched, and threw him out of the shop, screaming, "You'll get worse from me if you ever come back here." I told my boss what happened, and thankfully I didn't get in trouble for it, as she agreed he kinda deserved it. A year later, same sort of shift, and I was working with a young girl who was new to the job. She served customers while I was cracking, on filling the shelves, trying to make room in the back before a delivery. Come out of the stock room only to notice that the same guy has returned, and of course he is drunk again. I forgot to mention this guy was probably old enough to be my dad. I stayed hidden in the back, hoping my colleague would serve him and hoping he would just leave, but I noticed he kept saying to my colleague, "Hi, beautiful. How are you?" I thought he was really over the top with the word beautiful, but of course he didn't leave. I noticed he was trying to reach over the desk trying to touch her. While my colleague was pressed with her back against the wall, trying to keep her distance but trying to maintain that customer service character. I could clearly see she was terrified, so I had to rescue her. I burst out of the back and get behind the desk and stand in front of her, pointing her to go into the staff's kitchen to get away from him. Then I turned to the man and told him, "Listen, mate, you need to leave now." The guy laughs and says, "I'm not doing any harm, babe. I was only chatting with her." I had to cut him off and, reaching over the desk to try and touch her. "That is not okay," I said. "The girl is just trying to do her job, and we are all paid to fill shelves and be nice to people. Get that through your head. Just because a 20-something-year-old cashier is smiling and being nice to you doesn't automatically mean she wants you." Then he started to get cocky. "Ah, I remember you. You're that dyke with the nice arse." This guy was super lucky there was a counter between us, and to add to that, he was also lucky there was nothing at hand to throw at him too. I held out my fist and responded, "Yeah, the dyke who fed you this fist. Unless you want to turn the other cheek, I suggest you screw off and consider yourself banned." He left the store with his tail between his legs. The funny part after this was there was a customer behind him, and that customer's jaw dropped after overhearing the whole thing. But he had the time to hear the whole story and also explained to my colleague that I basically told the creep I was a lesbian in hopes he'd back off, but he didn't, so I punched him in the face. This happened about 4 years ago. I had just started working at a university hospital in the US as a nursing care tech. At the time, I was planning on going to nursing school. I've since changed my major and graduated, and though working in a hospital would be a great starting place for the experience, and it would give me a better chance at getting into nursing school at that university. Anyways, I was always a very outgoing and friendly person. I still am, and I am not a stranger to anyone. I had no issues making new friends at my job. I worked the day shift, 7 a.m. to 7:30 p.m., 3 days a week. Our shifts always overlapped with the night shift in order to give a full report to them about the patients they would be caring for that evening. Sometimes I would have to give a report to a night shift employee by the name of Mark. Mark was always funny and outgoing, and we seemed to hit it off pretty well. I was dating somebody new at the time, and Mark was married, but I always felt like he was a cool friend to hang out with. We had previously discussed stories of going out to bars. One night, when I was getting off work, I had mentioned I was planning on going out to a bar the next night with a group of friends and invited him along. He was more than happy to join us. The entire time we were out there, we had a great time, and he hit it off with everyone there, despite not knowing anyone in my friends group. He never blatantly hit on me or gave any hint of indication that he was attracted to me. Just saw him as a friend, and it had always felt that way, and I felt the feeling was mutual. I arrived home around 2 a.m. and woke up maybe around 9 or 10 a.m. I checked my phone to find an unreasonable number of text messages from an unknown number. This was several years ago, and I no longer have the messages, but it was something along the lines of this. "I know you went out with my husband last night. I know you have a boyfriend, but you must be attracted to my husband. Otherwise, why else would you invite him out to a bar without my presence and without your boyfriend? I know my husband is attractive, and I don't always appreciate him going out with other women. Blah, 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 blah." I don't remember the next 4 paragraphs she sent me, but the one that stuck out was when she asked, "So, are you a team player?" with a smiley face. I kindly informed her that I do have a trusting boyfriend who did not mind if I went out with male friends, and I was in no way attracted to her husband. He was not attractive whatsoever to me, but I didn't outright say that. I also told her that while I understand and respect that they have an open relationship, I am not interested in experimenting with other couples, and I prefer my relationship to be monogamous. She was completely understanding and even offered to meet up for drinks with her husband and her in the future. Now, I really don't care if my new friend is a swinger or not. Not my personal lifestyle, but hey, I don't judge. I was willing to forget the whole ordeal and look past it. Mark and I made plans to go on a double date with my boyfriend and his wife, Helen, at a dance club. All was well, and we all had a lot of fun bar hopping and dancing. She seemed cool enough, and I learned that she was a school teacher in the neighboring town. By the end of the evening, we all have our friendly goodbyes and retreated home. Again the next morning, I woke up to a whole new set of a million text messages sent from his wife. This time not so friendly. She was upset and went off on me, claiming that I was a homewrecker and that I had destroyed their marriage. She claimed that I had grabbed his hand on the way to the dance floor and put his hand on my ass, which never happened. Then claimed I grabbed his ass, which never happened also. Then changed her story a third time and claimed I grabbed his ass, which again never happened either. I kindly explained to her that none of those events ever occurred. She said I obviously didn't remember any of it because I was too drunk to remember, and said my boyfriend had to carry me out of the bar. Now, I only had 2 drinks over the 3 hours we were out. I was never drunk or blackout, not even close, as she had put it, and I left the bar walking on my own with my boyfriend at the time, and had myself a good night's sleep. Either way, she wasn't having my side of the story. I decided to let it go and stop trying to convince her otherwise, and I was planning on having a talk with Mark regarding the misconstrued issue. The next day, she posted on Facebook about how her marriage was wrecked because of me. She used my name in her Facebook status and said she was going to show up at my house and settle it. She also said she never slept and hadn't slept in days, and it was all my fault, and she placed the blame for her failing marriage on me. The words she used describing how she was going to settle it weren't so kind or mature. She had no idea where I lived, so I wasn't too worried about it. She told everyone and left me a wonderful voicemail about how she planned on pressing charges against me for molesting her husband that night. A few hours later, she left me another voicemail sobbing and apologizing to me, telling me how horrible Mark was and how he's a jerk and really mean to her, and told me she was sorry he ever got in the way of our friendship, and she would never allow him to interfere with our friendship again. I hardly knew her, and I had only met her once in person. I promptly deleted and blocked her on Facebook, and my boyfriend did as well. I never returned her calls, nor did I worry about having charges pressed, because that never happened, and her husband had agreed with me prior. Although I had stopped responding and ceased contact with her, the phone calls started. She would call me at all hours of the day, anytime from 6 a.m. to midnight, but I never answered. Anytime she was awake, I had no issues leaving my phone on silent, so I just ignored them, thinking she would give up eventually. She lightened up after a few days. The next time I was at work, I decided to pull him aside into the storage room to have a talk with him privately because I didn't want coworkers to hear or get involved. I didn't think it was a big issue. I told him the issue I was having with his wife, and he apologized about it and told me he would have a talk with her, told me he would get her to stop. Great. Until he dropped this bombshell that would make all of this make a tad more sense, but still doesn't excuse her behavior. Nearing the end of the conversation, he bluntly told me, "Look, I'm sorry about everything that has happened with her, but I have to be honest with you. I want to bang you, and I told my wife I wanted to. She had an affair a few years ago, and recently, that's how I've been feeling. She wasn't okay with it at first, but she said if it was a threesome, she'd be willing to settle for that. Initially, she was alright with it, but as time passed since I told her that, she got upset about it. Sorry she's been so crazy." I was a little stunned, but it made everything come together for a bit about why she's been so upset. I told him I wasn't interested in him, and I also told him I didn't want to go out with him alone anymore, and I didn't want any more double dates, and that was that. Fast forward a week or so, and everything had calmed down. I thought it was over, and I was beginning to forget the whole ordeal. One night I was in bed, about to go to sleep, until I got a text message from a number I don't know. All it says is, "What's up?" I asked who it was, and whoever it was completely avoided the question. "I miss you." "Where are you living now? Can I come by?" "Hey girl, want to hang out tonight? We haven't seen each other in forever and it's been too long. Let me come over tonight and let's have a drink and catch up. I'm on Winchester Road coming into town and I heard you live around here. Where are you? I can stop on my way into town." "Hey girl, I miss you and I love you. When are we going to see each other?" I stopped answering because he or she would never tell me who they were. The texting was constant and the calls were even worse. The calls would come in at 2 a.m. every 10 to 15 minutes or so, and they would not stop until about 8 a.m. sometimes. This went on for 3 or 4 days. Around this same time, my boyfriend got a friend request from somebody with no mutual friends on Facebook, and she had messaged him privately over Facebook along with this request. She explained she was a new nursing student coming to the university we went to, and she was on Facebook to make new friends before she moved here from Indiana and was researching students at our university in order to make friends before she arrived. He thought it was innocent enough. My boyfriend was Middle Eastern and did not have a common first or last name whatsoever. He also had nothing to do with the College of Nursing at the university. He added her and they had casual conversations over Facebook about similar interests and hobbies, sports, and fun places to go around our town. All was fine and well until she started asking him inappropriate questions like, "What's your girlfriend like? Do you think I'm pretty? I'm prettier than her." I don't remember what else she sent him, but they eventually turned into sexual advances. My boyfriend wasn't cool with it at all and considered blocking her and let me read it because he wasn't sure what to do. I read through all of the messages, and the first thing out my mouth was, "That's Helen." He didn't believe me at first, but the way she described herself and her interests here was exactly like her. Once I explained all of that to him, he was convinced. She had made a fake profile with fake friends, which she had made in order for it to look real, and used Facebook pictures of one of her relatives. He confronted her about it, and she completely lost it. Started cursing at him, threatening him, telling him how she has no idea who it is he is talking about, and went on a long rant about how her husband beats her and she's pregnant, I guess for sympathy. Helen was never pregnant, and Mark never beat her, as far as I could tell at least. He told her he was sorry that she was in that position, and he eventually just gave up and blocked her. Somehow she managed to get his Gmail and university email, and once she found that, the emails started. Keep in mind, I was getting constant phone calls at the same time throughout the nights when this was happening. I mean, I was getting something like 200 plus missed calls when I woke up the next morning. Initially, the emails were threatening, then later moved to emails looking for sympathy for a made-up pregnancy and her abusive husband and all the horrible things he did to her. Then finally moved on to a confession about how she was really Helen and she was sorry. He never responded to any of them. Because he never sent a response to her apology email, along came once again another angry, threatening email. He didn't respond to that one either. At this point, I had had enough, and I was just worn out on the entire thing. It became exhausting, and I was so tired of dealing with it. A good friend of mine is an officer in our city, and I called him and told him everything what was happening and how bad it was escalating. I showed him all the emails, texts, messages, and phone calls. The first thing he did was call the number of the person who had been harassing me to have them stop. She had admitted it was her, Helen, and agreed to stop contact with me, but told my friend, Officer Walton, that she will be pressing charges against me for molestation. He explained to her that it is not possible and no such thing as pressing charges for molestation for grabbing a grown man's ass. She was displeased, but I think having an officer call her to cease contact with me and my boyfriend was enough to make her stop. I haven't heard from her since. Months went by and everything finally went back to normal. I had transferred to a different department within the hospital, so I would not have to work with Mark anymore. Never told anyone at work about it, and I do not wish to have any more contact with him, but I was still on the same floor despite being on a different unit. Passed through his hall one night leaving work. I had to in order to go home. He was off work that night, but I stopped in the nurse's station to say hi and bye to some of the nurses I used to work with. There was a large note hanging in the nurse's station with the extension to security. I laughed about it and asked what in the world could have happened to need their extension in such large bold letters. Nadia told me that apparently Mark had left his wife while she was at work. He packed up all of his belongings and moved to an apartment in town without any notice to her, and he was planning on divorcing her. This did not settle well with Helen. For a few days, she came up to the unit he was working on, looking for him in order to confront him about it. She only showed up on his off days for a few days until she finally found him. She never told any of the staff who she was. She just kept coming around asking about him. They would just tell her he was off work and she would finally leave. After 9 or 10 p.m., all visitors have to check in with security with a state-issued ID in order to enter the hospital. Helen had found an old pair of scrubs that belonged to Mark, and when she came up to the entrance, she told security that she had left her badge at home and she wasn't able to access the building because of it. Surprisingly, they just let her in. She went up to the unit he was working at and she began screaming, crying, and begging him to come home. One of the nurses called security because she was making a huge scene. When security arrived to escort her out, she threatened a whole bunch of crazy shit if he didn't come home. She ended up being admitted to the mental facility a few miles down the road. The staff had left a note up in case she showed up looking for him again. Several months later, he divorced her, graduated from nursing school, and moved back to Indiana once he found a nursing job from his hometown. I never heard from Mark or Helen again. Fast forward a year, I went out with my friend Officer Walton to just hang out and catch up, as we hadn't seen each other in a while. He mentions out of the blue, "You will never ever guess who left me a voicemail just a few days ago." Helen. I was dumbfounded. What the hell did she want? She still had her number for over a year. He'd only called her once, but I guess she kept it over a year and a half. He let me listen to the voicemail. She told him she was trying to divorce Mark because he was abusive and she needed to serve him a restraining order. She told him I was helping her out with it. Heck no, I was not. She said the courts had told her that she needed to find an officer on her own in order to do so. Her friend Officer Walton never called her back. He laughed and said that it was highly unlikely she had a restraining order because one is already in place. The county finds their own employees to take care of the matter. They do not leave it to victims to ask around and find an officer to take care of it for them. Regardless, he never called her back and we never heard from her again. So Helen, for the love of humanity, let's not meet. I don't want to deal with your shit again. So, my sister called my family the other day and told my parents about a strange man that she and her friend came across. They have been there for about a week and were out walking in the redwoods when a man appeared out of practically nowhere and startled them. My sister claimed that he looked completely normal and was even kind of handsome, in her opinion, but he gave off a creepy vibe pretty quick. He apparently began asking them weird questions like who they were and what they were doing out in his woods. After they explained that they were just out exploring, he quickly got annoyed and said that they were liars. My sister and her friend began to walk away quickly as they assumed he was probably on drugs, but he walked after them and said more weird stuff. She said that he even asked them to kiss each other because he knew they were lesbian lovers. They are not, by the way. My sister's friend apparently turned around and screamed at him to leave them alone. My sister said this is where he got scary as hell. She said he gave my sister and her friend the most evil and hateful look she's ever seen in her life, and he said this in response. You two are such disrespectful bitches. I've killed a few of you over the last few years, and I'd love to add you both to my count. My sister and her friend didn't even hesitate, and both booked it right after he said that. They heard him chasing after them and screaming at them. My sister said that she couldn't make much of what he said, other than he would chop them up and a few other threats. They both made it safely out of the woods, and they didn't see him anywhere. They got in their car and sped back to the town they were staying in. They called the police to file a report and headed to another area and will be heading home soon. I'm scared and mad that some creep did this to them. I was 12 years old when this happened. My family owns a beach house in a famous place that's known for having great surfing coasts and being generally quiet and friendly. This house is near the downtown area and besides the hotel where the story starts. As I said, I was 12. Early developer, according to some, I looked 15 years old, but still a kid who liked to hang out with my cousin Kathy and my friend Marcia who was 13. The usual for us was to go to the arcades, grab a bite to eat, and go to the crafts fair where you could buy earrings and silly stuff. Our outings were what you could imagine. 3 kids going for a walk, talking kid stuff, sharing a Walkman to listen to music. You know how it is. Until one day, we noticed a guy sitting outside the hotel beside my house. The hotel front yard, fenceless, had this bench, and he spent hours sitting there by himself. This guy was in his 30s perhaps, and one day he took an interest in my group. Then it escalated and he was interested in me. First, the catcalling. Hey cute girls, where are you going, sweetie pies? That became a constant in our walks, but we agreed to ignore it, thinking that the guy would probably stop, but he didn't. If anything, the catcalling became a graphic description of what he'd do to the busty brunette, if he caught me alone. His words, not mine. At some point, the situation started to worry me, but stupid me, I didn't tell anyone about it. Marcia told me that attention is attention. Just smile, but Kathy did listen to her gut, telling her something was seriously wrong and talked to my mom when I wasn't around. So one day, we were about to go out. My uncle, mom's brother, gave us some bucks to spend and we were thrilled, so we went downtown. When my mom asked, you guys going to the crafts fair? We say yes, and she's joining. When she's crossing the door with us, she claims that she forgot something and says, go and I'll catch you. This is where Mama Bear comes to the rescue. She was a couple of feet away from us when the guy starts his usual drill. I'm going to bang you so hard, baby girl, he said. After I turned around, I saw my mom running to the guy and starting to punch him in the gut and the head, then in the face, leaving several marks thanks to the ring she wore. Call your uncle, she yelled, and we oblige. My uncle, a huge guy with a slightly threatening appearance, took the next beating shift, while my mom followed by me and the girls went back to the front desk, demanding to know who the heck was the guy that made his jollies harassing her daughter. Turns out he worked at the hotel, like a handyman or something. My mom, fearless woman that she is, talked to the owner of the place, basically stating that if he didn't take action against the guy, he'd get a similar beating. Guy was fired in a heartbeat, and the girls and I were walking and enjoying our summer happily ever after. So please, If you have a son or daughter or any young kid in your family and inner circle, please teach them to trust you if anything is bothering them and believe them. Teach them to trust their gut and seek help from a trustworthy adult. I didn't speak thinking I could handle it. Turns out I couldn't. But fortunately, I had two badass grown-ups who went the extra mile to make sure I and the girls would enjoy the rest of the summer. My name is Corey. C-O-R-I. A usually feminine spelling of a name for a guy. Not that I mind much of the spelling or so on of what my parents gave me. A few years ago, I had just been let go from my first job out of college. It had been pretty good money, but the company went under, so I started applying to every job I could find, as you do. Indeed. Monster, even Craigslist. One Craigslist job in particular was based on the outskirts of the city I lived in, but I was ready to take anything. The job in question was some basic data entry and assistant work. At least that had been what the job listing said. I thought it was on the up and up, however, because this was one of the few Craigslist postings that had a website attached to it. It was a pretty basic website in retrospect, but the company message seemed to make it sound like they were heavily about serving the city and facilitating volunteer work. Within minutes of applying, I got a message inviting me for an interview that same day, though it titled me as Miss Corey. I was going to respond to correct them, but it read that it was an automated response, so there could be no one to read it. I figured I'd just have to correct them once I got there, and again, it didn't seem like a big deal. I'd got this once or twice before. I drove to the location the company website was listed, and it didn't seem too out of the ordinary. It was the second floor of a small building that was sandwiched in between a pawn shop and a phone store. I didn't think too much of it because this was a big city, and even if this was on the outskirts of the city, a job was a job. I looked up to the second floor of the outside and saw somebody looking down at me. I couldn't make out the face, but it was a person. That much I'm sure of. I went inside the building and took the elevator up to the second floor and didn't find a single soul. It looked like a half-finished office floor from what I remember, with some doors opened and some locked shut. But there was simply no one to speak to, no one to inform that I was here. There was one cubicle, but one of the detachable walls had been left in another office room. There was a computer monitor in one room but no desktop attached to it. A half-finished company banner and a bookcase. On closer inspection of the bookcase, all of the books weren't books at all, but a cardboard printing of a bunch of books stacked together. I finally had too much and called the phone number that had been on the website, but I heard no phone ringing from where I stood. More so, the phone I called seemed to cut my call after a ring and a half, sending me straight to voicemail. Sufficiently creeped out by now, or wondering if I had stumbled on something I shouldn't have, I took the elevator down. As the elevator's door closed, I heard someone muttering angrily. I thought that was a girl's name. I didn't want to stay to find out who said it. Instead, I walked right back to my car and drove back home, not even daring to look back up at the window of the floor I was sure I had been scheduled for. That very evening, out of morbid curiosity, I checked Craigslist. The posting was gone. I looked for the website. It had been disabled. To this day, I still wonder what or who did I stumble upon. My greatest regret is not calling the police about this. This happened in the year 2000. I was 21, living with my best friends in a 2-bedroom apartment in a pretty rundown area. Fortunately, there was no crime, as it was all two broke kids just getting started could afford. I spent my days juggling classes at the local community college and working retail. I was single at the time and would often spend my time online all night in chat rooms and Usenet. I had met this girl in a local area chat room, but we had been hitting it off, or so it seemed. I'd emailed her and we'd chat on ICQ. She had sent me a few pictures and I was really into her. Pretty much my type. Her name was Beth, and she had told me Beth by Kiss was her favorite song. This one rainy night in February we were talking and she had asked me to come over. She lived a few towns over, maybe an hour away. Like I said earlier, we were hitting it off and honestly I found myself liking Beth a lot, so I jumped at the chance to actually meet her in person. We made plans for me to pick her up and go to Waffle House. Showered and got dressed. Nothing too fancy. One of those long sleeve shirts with the stripe across the chest. Jeans and a hoodie. I didn't want to overdo it, but still looked decent. By the time I left, it was almost 11 and my roommate was asleep in his room. I headed out excited and nervous. In hindsight, I should have stayed home. It took a lot longer to get there than I thought it would. Probably thanks to the rain, but sure enough, her directions took me to the right place. A double-wide trailer in a rural area trailer park. I walked up the stairs of the front porch and knocked on the door. I've always been pretty shy when talking to girls I liked, and I was still nervous when she opened the door. The door opened just a little bit, and a little voice told me to come in. I walked in, apologizing for taking so long, and a little bit of a nervous daze. She said it was okay and to have a seat. I sat down, and then for the first time, I looked up at her. That was not Beth. This was a much older woman, maybe mid-40s, wearing only a bathrobe, sitting down across from me. I don't want to body shame, but I need to point out that she was huge. I'm a big guy as well, over 6 foot with a big Hoss-type body, but she was much bigger than me. I glanced around trying to figure out what was going on. I saw pictures of the Beth I knew on the wall, same pictures I've seen. Hey, who's that guy in the pictures with this older woman? I looked back at her and instantly noticed that she was staring at the clock nervously. I asked what was going on, and she started mumbling nervously. Actually, imagine a child telling you what they have done when in trouble. That's how she was talking, like a child caught red-handed. I pieced together that she used the other pictures of a girl around my age. I'm assuming the girl was a niece or something. In her mumbling, said it was later than she realized and he'd be home soon. My mind instantly raced to a friend telling me his uncle caught his wife using pictures of their daughter to lure younger guys over for anonymous sex. I quickly realized the guy in the pictures was her husband, and I was in the same situation. I fully respect others' relationships and was instantly ready to go. No longer nervous, I told her I was not going to mess around with a married woman. I told her to no longer contact me and that I was leaving. I was upset. Not only had I been lied to, but I had been cheated on before, and I knew exactly what that felt like and refused to have part in doing that to another person. As I walked out the door onto the porch, she yelled to wait. I turned around instinctively to see her coming towards me. She grabbed me, trying to kiss me, and I pushed her away, telling her to stop. Her face turned into a mask of pure insanity. She rushed towards me again, trying again. I tried to hold her back, but in a second she tackled me, knocking me over with her falling on top of me, grabbing me and grabbing at my genitals, kissing me and crying. She kept screaming for me to bang her. I was trying to push her off, but the fall had knocked the wind out of me. Not to mention, like I said, she was huge. I kept wrestling with her, trying my best, and somehow worked my legs in between us. I pushed them as hard as I could, knocking her off me. She stumbled up and fell over on her porch furniture. Adrenaline took over, and I ran as fast as I could down the stairs to my car. As I was sliding into my seat, I saw her picking herself up at the bottom of the stairs. She must have fallen down trying to get me still. I backed down the driveway, and as I looked before driving away, she was coming down it. Her bathrobe hanging half off her, and her naked body exposed and covered with scratches and dirty from the falls. I drove off as fast as my Ford Escort would take me. I don't know how I didn't get into a wreck from constantly looking in the rearview mirror, hoping she wasn't following me. I found my way back to the main road and before long, realized I had gone the wrong way. I pulled into the first gas station, intending to turn around. I noticed nobody was following me and the gas station was well lit and had a few cars. I felt safe and parked. Trying to get myself together after that insane scuffle. I still can't believe how scared I was. If you had seen that phase and been through that tackle, you would understand. I collected myself and got out of the car to use the bathroom and make sure I wasn't hurt. The adrenaline was wearing off and random pain started creeping in. It was then that I noticed the gas station was uphill overlooking that trailer park. I could see her standing at the bottom of the driveway. It looked like she was holding her head crying. At first, I felt bad for her. I'm a nice person to a fault. I've often let myself get sucked into bad situations by feeling bad for a person I shouldn't have. Saw this crazy person crying and felt bad somehow. Then I remembered her crazy shit and the pain creeping in, making me wonder if she seriously hurt me. So I used the bathroom and left. As I was getting back in my car, I looked back one more time. I saw a car in the driveway and a man was yelling in the front yard. I guess he got home while I was peeing. Can't imagine what it would be like coming home to your wife standing naked in the driveway crying. Judging by her mumbling before the insanity, I figured she wasn't a good liar. I got home and the next day told my roommate what happened. I didn't want to at first. I felt ashamed for some reason. Though, like I said, he was my best friend. He knew when something was wrong, not to mention I was limping around. My entire body was killing me. He figured she was unhappy in her marriage and maybe her screwing around made her a little crazy. Or maybe she was already crazy and the situation set her off. Maybe on drugs. I don't know. Cut off all contact, and it's been almost 20 years since this night. Never heard from or seen Beth again. I'm 41 and happily married. My best friend is still my best friend, even though he no longer lives in the state. We never really talk about it. Outside of this, I've only talked about it to a therapist I visited during a particularly hard time in my life. My wife doesn't know, and I still feel pretty ashamed about it. The therapist told me it was probably from a little PTSD type thing, not to mention guilt from perceived gender roles. Maybe. About 3 years ago, my group of friends decided to go on a holiday weekend trip to the hometown of one of the girls, as her family had a small villa not far away from the urban center. We arrived Friday afternoon and decided the first thing we should do was party at the disco. We prepared and were ready to go just before 8 p.m. That's when Gigi, our hostess, gave us a warning. Girls and guys, a little something before we go. We are going to the biggest bar in town, which is sometimes frequented by narco dudes. Not to scare you, they don't do anything if you don't bother them, but be careful with who you dance with, especially you, Ken, our fuckboy friend. Don't go chasing some hitman's girlfriend. Now, who is ready to party? See, Gigi's hometown, which you could say is more of a very little city than a town, is basically the capital of our country's whole eastern region. The area is mostly plains, cattle and such. Picture the American Wild West, and is also home to a lot of drug trafficking routes, plantations, and hideouts because the government has little to no strength in the faraway areas. Drug lord presence is strong, and while they normally keep to themselves, it's not uncommon for them or their henchmen to be on the town doing their daily activities. Many are not even publicly known as criminals, so no bigger deal there, but for those who are, people and police just look to the other side in fear of what they could do to snitches. I tell you all of this so that you understand that while Gigi tried to make her warning more user-friendly, she was totally serious about it. Back to the story. We were in the disco having some good times when we lost the protagonist of this tale, Rosa, who by the way gave me permission to post this. Rosa is, well, she is kind of a hoe. Nothing wrong with it, and I love her to death, but man, this girl's hormones have gotten her in some spiky situations. The night goes on and Rosa is nowhere to be found, and when it was time to go home, we could not see her. We blasted her phone until she finally sent a message. Girls, I'm in this amazingly private after party. Don't worry. I will be in the house by tomorrow. Gigi's face says it all. The first thing I said. The first and only. We will be lucky if we see her in a week. Why is she so dumb? As Gigi predicted, we wouldn't see Rosa for the rest of the weekend, meaning Saturday, Sunday, and Monday morning. We were worried, but Gigi told us that we should not call the authorities. We needed to wait a little bit more. Obviously, our little vacation was ruined by all of this because we were constantly preoccupied. You can imagine our sight of relief when Rosa finally contacted us, just before we returned to our city. She called to say she was waiting downtown. I'm going to skip our reunion for a little while so I can jump to what Rosa told us happening in her absence. In the disco, she met a handsome guy that called himself Diego. He was tall with big muscles and a great dancer, who, after an hour of dancing and kissing, offered to take her to a private party in a villa with some of his friends. I don't know if she was very drunk or smitten, but she said yes. She went outside with him, where they met a group of 14 girls. Apparently, they were all gorgeous according to her description, and a bunch of guys. Some like Diego, and others just plain scary that looked like badly disguised soldiers. Diego made a call, and, in no time, 5 SUVs came and picked them all up. After a 40-minute ride, she found herself in what she described as a literal mansion in the middle of nowhere. They were welcomed by a good-looking woman that could be in her late 40s who guided them inside. Rose assessed that in the house were other girls and a few guys, but it was obvious that the main guests were 7 older men who everybody obeyed. They were drinking, sniffing cocaine, and making out with the ladies and even some of the guys, including Diego, much to Rose's grief, and invited the recently arrived to join them. My friend's memory becomes blurry after this first impression, but in summary, she had 2 full days of pool partying, alcohol, drugs, and even orgies. The men gave them designer clothes and bath suits they could model for them. Occasionally, they would be gifted jewels, purses, cash, and the like. Whatever they wanted, they got it as long as they made the 7 hosts happy, which meant mostly sexual favors. By Monday morning, the 15 quote-unquote new girls were asked to get ready and meet in the dining room, where the good-looking woman was waiting for them. Rosa believed she was the main coordinator of the event, as she had seen her giving orders to some of the servants that had helped them all weekend. She told them something along the next lines. "Well, ladies, didn't you have an amazing weekend? You all made our very important hosts so happy. As some of you may have noticed, before you arrived, there were already some girls hanging around. They are part of our little organization. We normally throw parties like this for our clients all the time, and that's the least we do, to be honest. Our girls travel the whole world with our patrons. They appear in magazines and have their own houses, cars, and a lot of amazing things. The gifts you get to take home are only a little taste of what we can offer. If you are interested, please call the number on the card I'm giving you right now and we will arrange everything. But be fast. We have few positions available." They were later escorted to the SUVs, but as they got in, the woman said one last thing in a very somber tone. "Oh, darlings, all of this is extremely private, so I hope you don't start gossiping around. It would be a very inconvenient situation if someone we don't want finds out about it." Another 40-minute ride, Rosa reunited with us, still with a hangover, and told us about her adventure. When we found her, she was wearing a green dress, brown leather boots, gold earrings with matching bracelets and collar, and a black purse we had never seen before. Inside were 3 other pairs of earrings, 2 rings, a pearl collar, and a brand new iPhone X, along with some other clothes and her own phone. We later checked all of the things online to see the price. A total of $4,500 in designer clothes and jewelry, without counting the new cell phone. To this day, I don't know if Rosa ever considered calling the number, but we all saw her ripping the card away after our items research. She told us she was happy with her good luck, that nothing bad happened to her, but she didn't want to risk it in another round with this organization. From when I was about 11 to 14, I had a best friend named Spencer. He had a decent-sized family and a big house. We hung out practically non-stop outside of school. He was homeschooled and I was in public school. During the summer, I practically lived at their house. Spencer had an older brother named Keenan. He was about 5 years older than he and I thought he hung the moon. He was so cool. He listened to cool music, played guitar, and I always wanted to be around him. One summer when I was 13, Keenan went to summer camp. He was supposed to visit the Grand Canyon and go kayaking and do a ton of fun stuff. We were jealous. It was weird not having him around all the time since I basically stayed at their house the entire time. Finally, the day came where Spencer's dad was supposed to go to the airport to pick Keenan up. We were super stoked to hear all about camp. His dad drove up and we ran downstairs to greet them, and yet we didn't see Keenan. His dad had tears running down his face and he exclaimed, "He didn't make it. He didn't make it, you guys." My heart dropped into my stomach and I started to panic. Keenan walked up right behind him and they both started laughing. It was a dick move. Anyways, we helped him unload his luggage and stayed up until midnight talking about his summer. He had so much to say. Said that he had the time of his life and told us all about how he almost went overboard whitewater rafting and how he surely would have drowned if he did. As 2 13-year-old boys, we were enamored by Keenan and everything he did. We talked about how Spencer and I were going to the same camp once we turned 18. It had been a long day and it was time for all of us to go to bed. Keenan told us he would tell us more in the morning when we woke up. I had fallen asleep and awoken in a cold sweat because of a nightmare I had. In my dream, Spencer and I had gone about our entire day that day just as we had before, except when their dad showed up and joked about Keenan dying on his trip. He actually did die. This was practically my idol and my dream is so vivid. I needed to go and get some water just to calm myself down afterwards. I checked my phone before I headed to the kitchen and it was 3:30 a.m. The house was so dark and I had to tiptoe to be quiet and make sure to not wake anyone up. As I walked through the den on my way to the kitchen, I see the moonlight spilling into the living room, the only light in the house. I see what I think is a large silhouette, and as I get closer and my eyes adjust, I see Keenan hanging from the ceiling fan. I freak out and run across the room in a dead sprint and turn the light on to see if my eyes were deceiving me. It was him. Except he was asleep and standing in the middle of the room underneath the fan, with one of his arms raised straight up over his head. I never knew Keenan to sleepwalk before, and luckily he snapped out of it before I tried to wake him up. He looked at me super confused. looked around and noticed where he was and said, "Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you guys. I guess I developed a bit of a sleepwalking habit at camp." For context, I am a female in my 40s. I am single and currently not looking for anything. The day of this occurrence, I had gone out to lunch with a group of friends. This group included a male, 30. We will call him Jay. This is obviously important later. After getting home from lunch, I had taken a long walk around my neighborhood. By the time I got home, it was getting to be late, around 8 o'clock-ish. I then made what now was an awful decision, to go to my local grocery store because I didn't have anything for myself or my cat to eat. I made the short drive to the store and began my shopping. For some extra details, the store was a Kroger. It was pretty large in size, so you could go to another side of the store and most likely not see somebody from the first side again. After getting a few items, I headed over to the produce aisle. Because of the time, the store was mostly empty, so when a man walked out from behind a shelf, it took me by surprise. This man was around 6'5" to my 5'6". He had an unkempt stubble and messy short black hair. Looking back at it, he looked high on something. He quickly approached me and began a conversation. Stupidly, wanting to seem friendly, I answered many of his smaller questions. After just making small talk about food and such, I tried to end the conversation because I was uncomfortable and needed to continue shopping. Before being able to walk away and say goodbye, he lowered his voice and asked me something along the lines of, "You're pretty. Let's go out for drinks tonight." This took me by complete surprise, yet I was able to quickly retort with the "I have a boyfriend" line, following that up with, "I have to go. Have a nice night." However, I couldn't even leave before he blocked my path out of the aisle with his cart and kept trying to talk me into drinks. "What's wrong with having two men? Just one drink," he said. At this point, I was annoyed and uncomfortable. I was about to tell him to move when out of the corner of my eye, I saw Jay walking towards me. I rushed with a sense of relief, and the creep must have been scared because he speed walked away. "Jay, hey, I didn't know you were going to be late night shopping like me. I ran out of time after our lunch today and needed some food." Me, "Yeah, I had to get dinner items." "Listen, Jay, that man over there has been making some creepy conversation with me and he's watching us." While talking to Jay, I had noticed the man looking at us from across the aisle now. Jay subtly looked over while I was explaining what the man had said. Jay offered to shop with me, which I accepted. As mentioned earlier, if you were to go to the other side of the store, you would end up losing previously seen people. That is, if they aren't following you. So when Jay and I saw this man almost hiding behind some pop-ups in the dairy aisle, I started to get a bad feeling again. Jay noticed him following us as well and told me to ignore it as we finished getting our stuff. After getting all of our items and seeing him a few more times, we went to the self-checkout and purchased all of our items. However, before we could walk out, he was there, walking around the exit, not leaving or looking for anything, but almost guarding it. We made eye contact and he gave me an absolutely menacing grin. I told Jay about what he was doing and he suggested we wait a little while away from the exit and see if he leaves. That is exactly what we did, spending around 40 minutes talking. Thankfully, the creep left out the exit. Jay offered to walk me to my car and I accepted. As we were bringing our things to my car, in the now basically empty parking lot, there was a car in the spot right next to mine. We stopped dead in our tracks because I believe that was the man's car, now waiting for me. If that was his car, the man must have seen that I was still with Jay because the car turned on and left the lot. I got home safe that night and I genuinely believe that Jay must have saved me that night. I'm so grateful for that coincidence for our timing. So, to the creep at Kroger who stalked me, potentially waited for me in the parking lot, it may be worse if not for Jay. I hope we never meet again. So this takes place right around the summer of 2012, if memory serves. I and my younger friend AD, very much like a younger brother to me, got jobs through his mom's friend working the garden section at our local Home Depot. We were total freaking stoner drug addicts who didn't give a fuck. Baking, clocking out for lunch, and taking an hour and a half on our lunch break to smoke weed while getting paid still, and avoiding any and all forms of work. I was trying to talk to AD into not being a total piece of crap at work, but we just had too much fun together being crazy. Now, our boss and the lady who hired us, Robin, was a really hard worker who really cared about how good the garden section looked, and was always raving about her boss, Cooper. Now, when I say raving, I mean, wow, She wanted to have this dude's kids. Like, she was always going on and on about what a stand-up, great, hard-working, charismatic dude he was. He's just so wonderful. He runs 7 garden centers and Home Depots across 3 different states, and he does such a good job. I just don't even know what we would do without him, she said. We were just teenagers, but we were already sensing something off with how much Robin raved about this dude. Finally, the day comes when AD and I get to meet the regional manager, Cooper. We didn't give much of a rip beyond finally putting a face to the name Robin had hammered into our heads over the past 2 months. A young, healthy-looking guy in his mid-30s walks up to us with a huge smile plastered on his face. I have to admit, before he even walked up to us, there was something different about this guy's energy. As he walks up, we realize he has a pregnant woman accompanying him. What followed was the most strange, ethereal conversation I had in all of my 19 years of life at that point. Hey man, I've heard a lot about you. Yeah, and you're Cooper, I assume. Nice to meet you. I've heard a lot about you too. He reaches out to shake my hand and says something similar to AD and shakes his. He says something along the lines of, "This is my fiancée. We are expecting in a few months," and gestures to the woman beside him. She quietly smiles. Now when I tell you this guy launched into the weirdest tirade of my life. Wow. You're an emotional guy and you're very in touch, aren't you? You probably cry a lot. That's a good thing. Now, I have always been very comfortable with crying as a dude. If I feel like shedding some tears, whether happy or sad, I'm going to do that. But I probably cry about 3 to 5 times a year, honestly. By no means do I do it a lot, and it sticks out to me to this day because of how weird it was. Then he starts telling us the secret and how the law of attraction is real, and keep in mind, this is before the New Age wave where everybody knew about the book. It was actually my first introduction to all that stuff. This guy had so much charisma. It was honestly unnatural. After finally meeting him, I had a better understanding of why and how Robin was so obsessed with this dude. I came away from that conversation feeling truly exhilarated, and the dude knew how to get into people's heads. AD and I could feel that from one of our encounters. Now skip to about a month or 2 later. After AD and I had inevitably got fired, I woke up to Robin calling me at 9 AM, which was weird considering I didn't work for her anymore. I groggily answered, "Yes, Robin?" "Hey, remember Cooper?" "Yes, Robin, I do. He just strangled his fiancée, raped her dead body, and then called the police on himself." I don't even know how to react to the news. All I could think of was the fact that I had shaken hands with a sociopathic murdering rapist not 2 months prior. And the truly strange part, I did not feel like I was around a dangerous person at all. His energy was all over the place and unorthodox. But sinister? No. Compared to the lady my sister and I walked by in a steak and shake at age 9, and I remember looking into her eyes and knowing I had just looked into the eyes of an evil person and or demon. I will post a news article in the comments. Come to find out, this dude was not engaged to her, and the kid she was pregnant with wasn't even his. Crazy frickin' people, man. Wild. I never felt in danger, but in hindsight, I think this is a pretty creepy encounter. This story happened when I was in college. There was something about my early years in college that just seemed to bring on a slew of experiences that ranged from creepy to terrifying. I don't know what it was about that time in my life. The experience was somewhere in the middle of that spectrum. Anyways, one night at the beginning of summer, following my freshman year of college, some of my high school friends and I were going to a party. We hadn't seen a ton of each other in the preceding year because of all of us being away at college, mostly just during school breaks and a few random weekends here and there. So we were all feeling kind of giddy at having the whole summer together. I wouldn't have normally gone to this party hosted by someone else that we went to high school with, but they all wanted to go and I wanted to hang out with them, so I agreed. This is not the mistake I made in this story. That would come later that night. We got to the party and we realized it was almost exclusively people from high school, which was kind of nice actually. It was like a big reunion. Soon my prior inhibitions were gone, and that was only partially because I started throwing back screwdrivers the moment I got there. A couple of hours later, I was more than a little bit tipsy. Nah, I was full on drunk, though not totally plastered yet, which would prove to be my saving grace in this story. After a while, a group of my friends finally decided to split off. The host of this party, Stephanie, lived in her parents' house still, and it was in the middle of nowhere, basically near a forest. Forests at night both scare and enthrall me, so drunk me suggested that we go exploring. This is something my friends would not let me live down, like not ever. So anyway, this group, Lauren, Hillary, Jared, Alex, Hugo, Dean, and host Stephanie, plus myself obviously, decided to go on a midnight walk through the woods. It was pretty creepy, not gonna lie, but in a cool kind of way. At least I thought so. A couple people in the group, namely Hillary and Alex, were pretty afraid, but Hillary went because of her best friend was Lauren, and Alex had a thing for Hillary and Lauren, which was a whole thing. Not the point of the story, but because of that, they were both there. They kept making comments about how creeped out they were, and I kept telling them to relax. No one else is out there, I told them. Let's just enjoy this time together. Being drunk makes me feel weirdly sentimental, okay? We walked through the forest a bit, and then we came into this clearing with a lake and dock and tall grass and stuff, plus a shed and what turned out to be a boathouse, both of which had seen better days. Now, Stephanie and I weren't exceedingly close, so this was my first time exploring this forest, but Dean and Hugo had been here before and remembered this place. They mentioned that they thought Stephanie's parents forbade them from going back here because it wasn't their property, which was true. It was like suddenly Stephanie realized where we were. I wasn't the only one drunk, okay? And her eyes got super wide and she looked nervous. Not scared exactly, more like worried that we would get in trouble, and she said we should go back. I told her that everything was fine since you can totally trust the judgment of a drunk person, and because everyone else was drunk, they all agreed with me. Safe for Steph, but she was outnumbered and not about to go back alone. Even Hillary and Alex were okay with staying, and because logic is a friend to drunk people everywhere, I suggest that we play hide and seek, and mostly everybody agreed. Honestly, I don't know why people kept listening to me. Now if I'd been sober, this was the kind of place I'd be freaked out about. In a cool way, sure, but not in a let's play hide and seek kind of way. This is where things go wrong. Hugo was forced to be it because we were assholes and told him he didn't have a choice, so he went into the woods and counted while we all ran to hide. I saw Dean dart into the shed, but everybody else ran into the woods. I decided to duck down in the tall grass, which varied in height. Sometimes I could kneel and sometimes I had to be on my stomach to be totally concealed. As I was hiding, I heard voices from the trees nearby. Whispers, like the speakers were trying to not be heard. I was curious, so I made my way all the way towards the voices, first on my hands and knees, and then eventually army crawling as soon as the grass got shorter. I nearly cracked myself when I ran into Stephanie in the grass, who turned out to be doing the same exact thing as me. When we got closer, we realized that it was Lauren and Jared, and that was how Steph and I realized that they liked each other. We were listening to them flirt and looking at each other hopefully, and I swear we had a telepathic conversation about how good they would be together. But that was when we heard someone barreling towards us through the grass. Heart pounding, I turned to see who it was, just as Hugo threw himself next to Stephanie and me, and he looked terrified. Hugo, what the heck? I whispered, hissed, because there's no way he'd counted as high as we were making it. We were being real jerks to him that night. Sorry, man. He first looked around frantically and then told us what had him spooked. I'll never forget this because of the sheer terror I saw on his face and heard in his voice. There's someone in the woods, he told us. Stephanie tried to tell him that it was probably somebody else from the party, but Hugo said no. He'd seen the guy and hid behind a tree, and this guy seemed to be in his 40s, he explained. And he said the guy looked rough too, and he just had a bad feeling, so he booked it. It was just chance that he'd found Stephanie and me. He's looking for something or someone, he said, telling us that the guy was shining a flashlight around. As if on cue, somebody came walking out of the woods, and then he yelled out, "Jim, are you out there?" He sounded kind of angry, and now I felt stone cold sober. This wasn't right, and it was about to get worse because that was when we saw the shadow of somebody rowing a boat down the lake towards the dock. The first guy walked onto the dock to meet this guy, Jim, presumably, and I heard him demand, "Where is he?" The first guy sounded angry, like he was expecting another person to be there too, and the second guy, Jim, informed the first. I screwed up. They proceeded to argue, though I couldn't hear what they were saying, and when they went into the boathouse. I was pretty sure that no one had hidden in there, but I was worried about that plus the fact that two shifty guys were doing what seemed to be pretty shifty things. We needed to get out of there. I knew that, but Dean was still in the shed, which was too close to the boathouse for comfort given the situation. Lauren and Jared were now making out and totally oblivious, and Hillary and Alex were who knows where. Why had I suggested hide and seek? That was what I kept asking myself while I tried to formulate a plan. And we heard somebody running through the woods, but like they were trying to do so quietly, and I turned to see Hillary. It looked like she was trying to find somewhere else to hide, unaware of what was happening. And I saw her run towards the boathouse. It was like time stopped and I didn't know what to do or how to stop her. Honestly, I froze. but then Hillary hesitated when she got to the door. She would later tell us that the voices she heard inside made her pause. And then the door swung open. It was like something out of a movie. Hillary was now hiding behind the door, and the first guy stood in the doorway looking around. I think he must have heard Hillary, who was not being nearly as quiet as she thought she was. If he closed that door from the outside, he would see her, and then we would be well and truly screwed. Luckily, he went back inside and closed the door. We had to get the heck out of there, but still had to get Dean, Lauren, and Jared and find Alex. We didn't have a lot of time. I didn't think, so we had to be fast. Then suddenly Hugo stood up, cupped his hands around his mouth, and bellowed. "Caw, caw." He apparently thought we were in a movie. I just looked at him with a "what the heck, dude" expression on my face. It was not what I would have done, but I'll be damned, it worked. Hillary came sprinting towards us, as did Alex, who had been hiding behind the boathouse. Likewise, Dean emerged from the shed, and Lauren and Jared detached themselves from each other. Alas, the two men in the boathouse heard us too and came busting out. But by that point, we were all sprinting away. I swear I've never before nor since run that fast, and at one point Stephanie tripped and I practically ripped her arm out of its socket while pulling her to her feet. Sorry, Steph. The guys chased us for a bit at least, though I don't know how long because we just kept running until we got back to Stephanie's house. The party was still going and the men hadn't followed us beyond the woods, but we were too freaked out to stay. I called my brother to come pick us up and we all left. Even Stephanie, who left her house unattended save for the drunk partygoers. We spent the night at my brother's house that night, and then we went back to Steph's house to clean up the next day, because honestly, this experience kind of bonded us in a weird way. Lauren and Jared are now married. Hillary and Alex were both in the wedding. Alex even briefly mentioned this incident in his speech. I lived with Dean for a bit following college, and Hugo is one of my best friends, as is Stephanie, which is weird because we weren't really friends before that. But I swear, we thought we were going to die that night. All of us. Except maybe Lauren and Jared. Even Dean heard what was happening outside the shed and was waiting for the right time to make his escape. You can go through something like that and not come out closer. It's strange, but also kind of nice. Like, we've had this shared history, which was true before this, because of going to school together, but it's different now. I wanted to go back to investigate in the light of day, but only Dean wanted to go with me, and I thought maybe that wasn't enough people. I was still pretty spooked, though intrigued. Stephanie told us later, though, that she told her dad when her parents got home later that day, and he and a few of his friends went back there and didn't find anything out of the ordinary. They moved shortly thereafter. Not because of this, so we never found out what happened, but we've also never forgotten it. In 2020, I was in the second year of graduate school. Even before the pandemic, many of the classes were online instead of in person. Normally, this was not a problem, but since my parents lived in a rural area, I had to commute to use the school's internet for my schoolwork. When COVID hit, all of my tests had to be taken online, and the literal 3 Mbps my parents got on their satellite internet connection would not be good enough to help me with my schoolwork. If my university were to lock down and send the students home, I would have to withdraw for a semester. Since this was not an option, I began searching for apartments in the smaller college town. After a short search, I was surprised to find an opening at a student complex, 3 miles from campus. Not having any options, I signed a lease and moved in the next week. Eventually, my predictions came true and the university locked down. I felt extremely lucky to have one of the few coveted spaces in town. Even as I walked into the office to get my keys, there were literally people crying on the steps. Did they know someone with COVID? Did they have a bad home life? I thought. I genuinely felt bad for them. Whatever their situation, I thought I had dodged a bullet. Little did I know these things were about to take a turn for the worse fast. The apartment was very poor quality, but it was the cheapest rent in town. It was all my cash could cover, so I was happy to have it. However, the lack of a security deposit and the ability to pay your rent up front meant that, unfortunately, desperate people started to move in. About 5 months into lockdown, there seemed to be very few students left living there, and many of the remaining residents seemed to be in their 30s or later. I heard a lot of rumors about drug dealing going on in the complex, but wrote it off because every college except BYU and Liberty has a large weed culture. Eventually, however, people started to find syringes in the landscaping, and the gravity of the situation became more obvious. Rumors continued to circulate, but I wrote them off. That was until one summer afternoon when I was riding home on my bike from Whataburger. My apartment was in one of the rear buildings of the complex, so I had to ride through the parking lot to get to my door. As I pulled through, I noticed 4 or 5 police vans parked in front of the building. It looked like a massive drug bust, so I called my friend Mike over to come take a look at the situation. He lived across from me, so it was a quick walk for him to come over. We watched the commotion from my balcony for an hour, speculating on what it could be. We both agreed that one of the dealers probably was busted and was on his way to prison. That was until we saw the men in dress shirts and ties walking out of the complex, wearing surgical gloves. We saw on the news the next day that the man living in that apartment was murdered in broad daylight after walking out of his apartment. Supposedly, he was shot while exiting and died on the way to the hospital. We never found out why, and I don't think the police ever caught the person who did it. I don't know if they had a suspect. All I know is that I was glad I was out when all of this was going on. At the very least, I could have witnessed something that would have scared me for life. I've since moved into another nicer complex in the city and don't have to worry about such things. As a teenager, I waited tables in a local restaurant to pay for the gas for my car. I met Mr. Creep there. In my naive mind, he seemed normal at first, despite the fact that he was 20 and wanting to date a 17-year-old. Even my desk job after dark scared me, so I taught myself to get in my car, shut the door, and lock it in one fluid motion. It made me feel safe. One night, I was leaving work and had just gotten into my car when Mr. Creep seemed to just appear out of nowhere, yanking my door handle to try to open it. I looked into his eyes in the split second before he smiled, and what I saw absolutely chilled my bones. I don't know how to describe the evil I saw. From then on, I was terrified of him, but I didn't let on because I was afraid of what he might do if I told him I never wanted to see him again. After this, he constantly lied and tried to impress me and tried to invent ways of being alone with me, but my instinct was to run, so I avoided him. About 2 weeks after this incident, the restaurant got robbed and there was significant evidence against Mr. Creep, just not the kind that allowed the cops to charge him. I sent all of my text conversations with Mr. Creep to the police chief in hopes it would help. Mr. Creep slithered away after that, but I always looked over my shoulder. About 5 years ago, he messaged me on Facebook out of the blue. He went on about his top secret military clearance as well as a huge acreage he owned. It made me nervous and I felt like he was trying to spring a trap or something, but I tried to put it out of my mind. Then today I was looking at posts about an unsolved murder when I saw his mugshot. He is now facing murder charges as well as 2 other violent felony charges. I'm so glad to know he's locked up, but so overwhelmed about how correct my instincts about him were. I feel like I escaped him.